Thank you, Jessica. Commissioner Cheney, you can go ahead and start.
Okay, thank you. And good afternoon to everyone. This is Board Chair Linda Cheney, and I'd like to welcome you all to the public board meeting of the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners. Just a reminder to everyone who is joining in to please have your phone on mute. I am going to now start off by reading the roll call of the board members to identify who is here. And just a reminder to my colleagues, as we go through the meeting, to please identify yourself when you're speaking for the record. Commissioner Bondima?
Yes.
Here. Thank
yes,
you.
Bondima.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Thank you. Is Commissioner Frank here this evening? Yeah. Commissioner James?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Commissioner McFadden?
McFadden, I'm here.
Commissioner Reed with us? Commissioner Richardson?
Here.
Commissioner Roberts? Commissioner Sykes?
Present.
Thank you. And I am here. So by my count, we have 8 commissioners present and 2 absent. Okay. Is there a motion to reopen the meeting?
So move, Bondima.
Thank you. And a second?
Second, McFadden.
Thank you. And those in favor, Commissioner Bondima?
Yes.
And Brooks?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Fadden?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Roberts?
Yes.
Sykes?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm in favor, and no one is opposed or abstaining, so that motion passes. Thank you very much. I'd like to take some time as we start our meeting to recognize the passing of a city school employee. And tonight, as always, we send our deepest condolences to their friends and to their family. It's with deep regret that we inform you of the passing of Lynn Carroll Washington, who served in city schools for 6 years as a principal at Homeland Security High School, academic dean, was also academic dean, student support services at Benjamin Franklin High School, and lastly, a teacher at Coppin Academy High. Ms. Washington unfortunately departed on October the 20th of this year and will be greatly missed by her family, friends, and city schools. So if you would please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. And moving on, is there a motion to approve the prior open session minutes? That Commissioner Roberts?
So moved, Richardson.
Okay, Richardson. Is there a second?
Second, Robert. I couldn't get the
Thank
words
you,
out.
Commissioner Rob. Okay.
I beat you. I beat you.
Those in favor, Commissioner Bondima,
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks,
Yes.
okay, Commissioner James,
Yes.
McFadden,
Yes.
okay, Richardson,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Sykes,
Yes.
and I am in favor. Any opposed? No one left opposed or abstaining. So that's 8. This motion passes. And then we have a motion to approve the closed session information. Is there a motion to approve the closed session minutes?
So move.
Bondima, is there a second?
Second, Robert.
Roberts. Okay, gonna ask this a little different. Is anyone opposed to this? If not, then I'm going to indicate that this has passed with those 8 who are present.
Oh, Commissioner 7, sorry.
7, sorry about that, yes. Sorry, Commissioner Sykes, I have to remember. This evening, I'd like to begin this part of our meeting in terms of my comments and recognizing our former student commissioner, Joshua Lynn. We were cut short during our recognition of his service at a previous meeting. And so first I want to read a proclamation from the school board and Dr. Santelises, and then I'm going to turn it over to board members and Dr. Santelises if you'd like to say something, have any words for Joshua. And so the proclamation reads, whereas Joshua Lynn served with distinction as the student commissioner of the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners from 2018 to 2019, as well as 2019 to 2020. And whereas Joshua Lynn served as a member of the Policy Committee from 2018 2019, as well as 2019 to 2020. And whereas Joshua Lynn served as vice president of the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City from 2017 to 2018, while he was also an active member of the Maryland Association of Student Councils. And whereas Joshua Lynn has exemplified the highest standards of student leadership while demonstrating a fervent commitment to the students and staff of Baltimore City Public Schools and performing outstanding service to the city of Baltimore. Now, therefore, the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners does hereby proclaim our thanks and best wishes to Joshua Lynn in grateful recognition of his dedicated service to public education in Baltimore City. And Joshua, this is signed by myself as chair of the board and also Dr. Sonia Santelises, who is the chief executive officer. Thank you. I'll get, since I got to read the proclamation, I want to say thank you. It was just a pleasure serving with you. I especially enjoyed some of the evenings when I got to give you a ride home and talk a little bit about what you were doing also as a student. But I was amazed. I don't know how you did it all. Even reading the proclamation amazes me as to how active you are and still there worrying and really being a wonderful advocate for the students in the city. So thank you. And so I'm going to open it up to Dr. Santelises and board members if you'd like to say something to Josh.
Well, Josh, I would love to just begin by saying that your combination of what I always think of as youthful exuberance with just a maturity beyond your years gave such great insight into almost every discussion that you weighed in on. Your service on the policy committee, you held us accountable, but you led when you did it. You modeled what it means to not just kind of raise a question, but raise a question and get to a solution that has impact for students. And I've always respected you and admired you, and just am thrilled. Going to go and continue to lead in great spaces, but your voice will be absolutely missed. And I know that Kyrie has already expressed just, some of that same exuberance. And I know it's from seeing your example. And so you have served your city well, you have served city schools well, and you have served your colleagues well. And I'm going to miss that smile, my brother.
If I could jump in, this is Commissioner Richardson. Josh, I love in board meetings when we're talking about events at schools and waivers for alcohol. How Josh was always like, I have a question. How are we keeping the kids safe from alcohol? And I just love that. I often looked at you and I would think back when I was in high school, and I'm like, I don't know where he gets this from. I wasn't that kid, right? And so I'm so proud of you. I know that you are going to go so far, and the way you represented our district, our school, no matter who you're talking to, national audiences, I mean, you made me so proud. And so I'm happy that to have had a chance to serve with you. You sent me text messages and I'm like, who's this? And you're like, if you don't put my name in your phone, you remember that, right? So I just, I wish you well. I wish you the best. And and Kyrie, for you, I can't wait to form that same relationship with you. And so thank you both for your leadership. And Josh, I wish you well.
I'll go next. I don't want to go after Commissioner McFadden, so I'm going now. Joshua, it was such an honor and a privilege to serve with you. The moment that I always reflect on was, I believe, one of the earlier COVID virtual board meetings that we had, and you reported live from your work closet for a board meeting. I will never forget that. That is just a true testament to your dedication to not just the students of the city, but ensuring that we as adults were still showing up and despite of. And so I will miss that. And I look forward to working with you also, Kyrie. But that was such a joy, and I will never, ever forget that.
Hi.
Ronald, okay if I go next? So I can also go before you go?
I'll go after
Okay.
everybody.
So Josh, I just want to say your leadership, your service, you created for a pathway to this place and space for your colleagues and back in school. And I would like to say that I appreciated watching you mature in your policy and understanding that process. So it was a privilege to be part of that. And I'm really hoping that in your honor, that this board seriously considers changing the policy so that the student member has full voting rights. And so with that, Kyrie, I'm happy to chat with you about how we might be able to support that. Good luck, Joshua. Appreciate you.
Who's next? Bundima. Who's coming in next?
Hey, Josh, this is Vernon Reed.
Okay.
I didn't have the opportunity to sit with you on the policy committee, so was another. I really appreciate. I remember one time going by your part-time job and saying, "Damn, he does this too." So you had the school board, you had the policy committee, you had stuff at City College, and you still had time to work. I'm impressed by you. I appreciate your work ethic. Be strong, and best wishes for whatever you try to do in the future. Thank you.
Hi, this is
Mr.
Bundima.
Bundima?
Yeah, thank you. Josh, you are the deal. And I need to say that, and I hope that you always remember how much we really care for you. And whenever you get to the point that you need anything, I'm sure you know where to turn and who to turn to. But what impressed me more is how you questioned and how you debate. And one day when we had this issue, you literally looked at me and said, give me an example of what you're talking about. And I said, okay, you know, and that was such a grown up question. And I really appreciate it. I thought about it all night. It was in reference to who's in charge and who can make decisions during emergency. I think you remember that, Josh. And I gave some examples, and I was so happy that you asked that question because I had so many examples. But when I look at you, I see happiness. You're thrilled at what you're doing, and that's going to lead you into some wonderful, wonderful territories. And again, whenever, if ever you need anything, I hope that you look back on us and come to us for as much help as possible, because I see you out there in the future and maybe one day applying for the president of the United States. So good luck.
Commissioner Lynn, I know that we have to move on, and I just want to make this brief. I just want to let you know that I'm extremely proud of you. You have served the city well as you continue to serve the city well. I know that you will continue to serve the city well, and I just want to make sure that you also continue to mentor the folks that are coming after you. I think that is critically important that you build that continuum of leadership and quality leadership, as we clearly see and know that Kyrie is doing right now with us. Joshua, this one story, I know that we have to move on. It was before you became a student commissioner. And I'm not sure if, I don't remember what the topic was. I don't know if it was heating or if it was arming school police, but I remember you came, I can't remember what the topic was. And there were members of our community that started to attack you verbally in that meeting. And this was before you were sworn in and became a commissioner. And you handled yourself with such poise. You continued to advocate for the young people. And that was an experience that allowed you, that fueled that passion for you to apply to be on the board and to run and to be elected by your peers. And you were one of the youngest commissioners, and you served for 2 years. And I'm so happy and proud to call you my colleague, not just a student, right? But you were serving as a colleague on the board with us. And I just want to appreciate you, celebrate you. I'm very happy about your college aspirations. I look forward to seeing all of the great things that you do, and continue to keep in touch with us, Joshua, as I know that you will.
Thank you.
And Joshua, I'll be brief.
Joshua? Oh, I'm sorry.
This is Darrell.
Go ahead, Commissioner Brooks. I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Oh, no, it's okay. I just wanted to say it was an incredible honor to work with you and to watch you before I even became a commissioner. So I was looking at you using your voice and never letting anyone silence you, even when so many adults around you were. And I think what's incredibly powerful about that moment for me, watching you do that, was that when we begin to use our voice and lift it up and lift out and use it to lift up others and point out issues and challenges, it really does create an opening for other people to follow you. And my work with you on the policy chair and the policy committee, and just watching you before I even joined the board was really, really encouraging, because I knew that the next generation of leaders was right before me, and I got a chance to connect with you. So if you need anything ever, just call or tag my cell, and I got you.
So, Josh, again, we want to thank you. I think you received, correct?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Josh was frozen. Okay.
Yes,
Any quick
I
words
did.
you'd like to say to us?
I just would like to say thank you so much to every single one of you. You guys, I've learned so much from you all, including Kyrie, and I think that it's just, I don't know, I feel so mushy inside because you guys love me, but I just want to say that I love you all as well, equally, and that I think The biggest thing that I would want to do and the biggest goal that I've had was to ensure that other people knew the opportunities that students have when it comes to the school board. And I'm appreciative that I'm being able and given the opportunity to mentor and, talk to Kyrie on different things. And I hope after Kyrie, there's other people in that, this audience is building up to being something more than just me. And I've always had that goal, and I've always wanted to have that goal to make sure that every single student, 80,000 plus students in Baltimore City public school system, is given the opportunity to do that. I don't want to take up y'all much time because I know board meetings can run long, but I just want to say thank you, everyone, and thank you for the well wishes, and thank you for the gift. I really appreciate it, as well as Christian. I know Christian didn't get to talk, but Christian, I just want to thank you so much for being board exec and everything that you've done for me, including everyone else within city schools. But thank you so much, and I love every single one of you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Josh, and good luck. Um, uh, Board members and folks watching, I'm going to make one slight change to the agenda, if you don't mind. I know I have a couple of more things within my time, but because of we have someone who is joining us this evening, I'm going to turn over at this point to Dr. Santelises, and then I will come back and pick up with the rest of what I need to do. So, Dr. Santelises, I'm going to turn it over to you at this time for your report.
Great. Thank you very much, Chair Chinya. And part of why I appreciate the cutaway is because we are, I'd like to begin this evening really by welcoming Dr. Letitia Zaraza, who is the Commissioner of Health for Baltimore City, who has just been and continues to be an invaluable partner in our work to keep our staff and students safe during the pandemic. I will say Dr. Zaraza takes my calls on her way to a pumpkin patch with her son, whether it is a Sunday afternoon when I'm like, Letitia, can I really call you? And she does. She always picks up the phone. And we are in regular communication really regarding the latest COVID indicators, health indicators in Baltimore City, and the implications for city schools. She very kindly agreed to come this evening. She has the 5:30 meeting, so I want to make sure that I give her space to share. And thank you again, Dr. Zaraza, for being with us this evening.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Santelises, for inviting me this evening, and thank you for all the work that you're doing to keep our students safe as well. If you guys don't mind, I'd love to very quickly go through the data and where we are as a city. So I'm going to share my screen, if I'm allowed. And in the event that I'm not, I can begin to kind of talk through where we are as a city. So I would guess that many individuals know that we did last Friday, this past Friday, the mayor announced additional restrictions. Perfect, I can share now. Thank you. Here we go. So the mayor announced some additional restrictions this past Friday that were really related to what we've been seeing from a case count perspective, as well as other indicators that we look at. So from the beginning of the pandemic, we've worked very closely with the mayor's office to examine the data and make recommendations based on where we're going as a city. And we've identified a few key indicators with regards to what would encourage us, or what would get us to the point of making the recommendation for additional restrictions. If you live in Baltimore City, you will know that we moved a lot slower than many of the other surrounding jurisdictions in terms of lifting restrictions. And a big part of that is the fact that we are an urban city. We are densely populated. We recognize that we have a high-risk population. Additionally, we house 11 hospitals, more than any other jurisdiction in the state. And all of those things, in my opinion, place us in a slightly different category when we think about restrictions and when we think about imposing additional restrictions. I also want to underline, even with putting restrictions in place, I believe that everyone has a personal responsibility to continue to wear the mask, to continue to socially distance, to continue to do frequent hand washing, to continue to stay home if you're not feeling well. And so in addition to restrictions, we've also been very much pushing that messaging. What you do when you're not at work is just as important as what you do when you're at work. So we really try to again, just push that messaging as much as possible. So at a very high level, looking at where we are in terms of our data, when you look at our overall case count, we're now averaging about 124 new cases per day, and this is up 87% in the past month. We've seen a significant increase just over the past month. Having loosened restrictions, the last time we loosened restrictions was back on September 8th. So that's really what has prompted this new order, which is going to be a decrease of about 25% across all business entities, as well as a decrease in the number of individuals that can attend gatherings. The number of deaths we've experienced has remained relatively steady. We had a peak very early on in the pandemic, largely related to many cases that we were seeing in nursing facilities, but we've seen that for the most part level off. And a lot of the cases that we're seeing now are in young adults between the ages of 20 to 39. Our positivity has also significantly increased. And again, that positivity being the number of positive cases out of total number of tests performed. We're at about 4.2%, which is up when we think about where we were a month and a half, 2 months ago, we were at 2.5%. So looking at our reopening indicators, and I'm assuming everyone can see my screen okay. We've not seen the decline in number of new cases. In fact, we've seen quite the opposite. We've seen this increase. The number of deaths, we've not hit that 14 days of a decrease. Again, we have not necessarily hit the peak in terms of the number of deaths. That largely will come 3 to 4 weeks after the initial surge. But additionally, again, our cases right now are averaging a lot younger than they did very early on in the pandemic. So we would anticipate that these folks are not getting quite as sick. Our test positivity is still below our threshold of 5%, but it is very steadily inching up, which raises concern. And the state actually today hit above 5% for positivity. As far as the number of tests administered, we are exceeding that goal. So we do have relatively reasonable testing access across the city, though that's variable depending on where you are in the city. And lastly, if we look at where we are in comparison to, I would say, the rest of the state and even the country, you can see that we are starting to increase, and we do now have 20 new cases per 100,000 residents. Again, this is not necessarily very unlike what a lot of other jurisdictions are experiencing. I think that right now there's about 7 jurisdictions in the state that are above 20. And I think 10 jurisdictions in the state are above 15 new cases per 100,000. So, you know, I think the important thing and kind of takeaway here is that we are seeing things worsen. We are seeing, increase in the number of cases. We believe that, again, some of this is certainly related to there being just widespread community transmission. We've seen a number of things open, and that is the reason for the restrictions. That said, again, there's a number of measures that we can all put in place personally that will help to keep us all safe. And I want to take a moment to just commend Dr. Santelises and her team, who I've also met with, because they have worked very hard on a plan to really keep our students and keep teachers safe and keep staff safe. And a lot of that is, decreasing the size of classrooms, ensuring that there's social distancing, ensuring that, masks are being worn for children where it's appropriate. So again, we're seeing this rise, but do want to commend the team for all the hard work that they've put into planning what it looks like to begin to safely bring students back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zaraza. I know that this was tight timing for you, but there was no one better to give a framework for where we are as a city, and just want to continue to thank you. Sorry, my camera wasn't on. Want to continue to thank you just for the close collaboration around how to continue to keep staff and students safe. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I know you've got to scoot, so I want to but we appreciate you coming out, and we'll definitely have you back. But thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Commissioner Chinya. And also, before we cut back, I want to, in addition to the very close partnership that we have with our health department, we also have a guest here this evening, Dr. Charles Callahan from the University of Maryland Medical System, and we are really pleased to have Callahan with us tonight, as both he and Chuck Tilden, the Vice President of External Affairs at University of Maryland Medical System, have been great partners over the past few months. As a result, in partnership with University of Maryland Medical System, the State Department of Health, and Baltimore City Health Department, city schools will soon be offering on-site COVID testing for symptomatic staff and students who are working or learning at in-person site. When the effort was launched, health professionals, when this effort is launched, health professionals working as part of a mobile testing unit will travel to in-person learning sites to offer on-site testing to staff and students who are experiencing COVID-like symptoms. I think it's just important to note that Dr. Callahan is not only a partner in this work, but a member of the City Schools family, as his wife works as a social worker at Promise Heights firm in Templeton. So I just want to say welcome, Dr. Callahan, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. Can you hear me all right?
We can, sir.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thank you. It is a privilege. I am the Vice President of Population Health, and my job during COVID has been to be the Deputy Director of the Baltimore Convention Center Field Hospital. And as part of that role, I've had the privilege over the past, since June really, helping to lead the testing effort across the city, across the state, that is launched out of part of the mission of the Baltimore Convention Center Field Hospital. And as part of that, we have developed a capability to test large scale. The convention center testing site moved indoors last Wednesday, and we are moving to 5 days a week beginning at the end of this month, the week after Thanksgiving, and typically have capacity for about 1,000 to 1,200 people per testing day. That'll also be some evening hours, and we'll get more of that information out in the future. But we've also had the privilege of being able to field these jump teams, we call them, small teams of very skilled and experienced COVID testers that can go out on site, use the full protection, PPE and so forth, and safely test students and staff, and then bring those samples back where they're run through the University of Maryland Pathology Associates or UMPA lab. Often the results are back for the PCR within 48 hours. And so our idea is this will allow the students to not miss very much school, their cohort not to miss very much school, find the students who have been affected by COVID and effectively, isolate them to keep them from spreading. And my last thing I'll mention, and then certainly questions or however you want to proceed, is during peacetime or non-COVID, I get to do population health. And so my bias that I carry with me, in addition to being a pediatrician, practicing general peds for a while and specialty peds for a while,
at levels not seen since
the best thing we
June.
can do for kids in terms of long-term health is to keep them in school, to move them through their education, to get them to graduate and to pick up a couple of years of extra training, vocational or higher education. We know that that's one of the single best predictors of middle-age health that there is in the community. So on behalf of the state of Maryland and the Baltimore Convention Center Field Hospital, as well as the University of Maryland Medical System, it really is our privilege to be a part of this effort to allow children to return to school. So I'll stop there. Cleo, I don't know if you have any comments or if there's anyone who has any questions.
Dr. Callahan, thanks. You said it all. Nothing for me.
Just want to thank you, Dr. Callahan, for coming out this evening. And I just want to note that both Dr. Callahan, Dr. Zaraza, and their colleagues are part of the Health Advisory Committee that we really do lean on in terms of our decision-making, our health guidance. They are part of the reason, frankly, why our health protocols are as strong as they are, is because of their input and their guidance along the way. So Dr. Callahan, I want to thank you. I want to thank your wife also for her service and her work in city schools, but thanks so much for joining us this evening. Much appreciated. Great.
Can I ask one question?
Oh, sure.
Is he still here?
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
Dr. Callahan? Thanks for your presentation. I guess my question is, most Americans have come to the realization that we should listen to the experts. And you're probably you and Dr. Teresa are probably Baltimore's experts in terms of COVID and health. Based on the fact that positivity rates are going up and we're seeing more cases, give us your case for why we should continue to try to make an effort to be in the buildings with as many kids as we possibly can during this elevated period.
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I think it's a question we all have to kind of come to terms with as we head into the holidays, right? I think if the Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Jerome Adams, were here, the thing that he would argue and he was here this summer, very impressed with everything that's happening in Baltimore City. He would say that we need to observe those 3 W's, to wear a mask, wash our hands, and watch our distance. And he talks about the 3 W's over and over again. The countries around the world that have been effective in controlling this have been very, very diligent in applying those 3 W's to all that we do. And I would argue that we've got to carry those 3 W's indoors as we move into colder weather. And if we're very careful around those kinds of things, I think that we have a really good shot at really kind of slowing down this rate. There's an awful lot of folks that aren't paying attention to those 3 things. But equally important for people in my line of work is we have to remember that in the background of all this, people are making decisions and choices and day by day and month by month that will contribute to a long-term burden of the kind of chronic diseases. We are going to get through COVID. As a nation, as a state, and as a city, we're going to get through COVID. But we still have some big, big problems that we have to take on as health systems and as a community around diabetes and asthma and so many other things. And so education is a piece long-term for us to be able to answer some of those questions, not a year, not 5, but 20 and 40 years from now. And so that's why I think we need to make the case that this is the best thing from a health standpoint that we can do for our children.
Hi, this is Dr. Bundima, Michelle Bundima. How are you? And thank you so much for giving us this presentation. It's been very helpful. I have a great concern, and my concern is not about what happens when our kids get to the school, because we are doing an excellent job, I think, preparing the kids to be safe in the school. My great concern is outside of the school. Many of our kids take the subway, the bus, and walk to school. And it is clear, I'm a chemist, and I will tell you that I look at all of this, and I'm concerned when our kids get on the bus, and the company, they say they sanitize the bus in before the kids, in the daytime. And I'm sure they do it at night. That means absolutely not too much for me, because riding a busy bus with a community of all types, and the subway exposes the kids and the families in the community to all types of bacteria, microorganisms, and infections. And those the sanitation that they do on the bus is one thing, but when the kids leave the school and they come back to the subway or they travel with other people, that's my great problem. And I made a request that maybe MTA could have some kind of system, not expensive system, where they could put a wipes on the bus or maybe we can give the kids wipes. I don't know. So when they get on the bus and sit in the seats, they won't be exposed to all kinds of bacteria. And that, to me, is where the problem starts. We wonder why all of a sudden we ask people, were you exposed to this? Were you exposed to that? And they can't figure it out. And I'm clear that some of this happens when they leave the school. And what do we do about that? Because that we need to solve that problem. What happens after they leave the school and on their way home from school?
I'm happy to jump in too, Dr. Callahan, if that's helpful. I mean, one of the things, Dr. Bondima, that we're trying to do is make sure that within the school community, we have those safety protocols that Dr. Callahan mentioned. So we do the health screening when students come in. We have the safe social distancing. We have the ventilation systems in place so that you're right. We can't control the entire environment of anybody being in our schools. Just like Dr. Callahan can't control it at the convention center. People can come in, we don't know what they're doing on the weekends. So what our job is to reduce transmissions by making sure we have those mitigation strategies in place. And we do have the mitigation strategies that the CDC has identified for low transmission at schools. We have all 5 of them in place. With this partnership that we have with Dr. Callahan and the convention center, that would be an additional measure, 6 in place. So I think that's the way we can't control everything people do in their own lives. It's controlling the environment that we do control to make sure there are health and safety measures in place. And that, now we'll be able to also test anybody when they're symptomatic. So I think key things I would think about. I don't know if you have anything else, Dr. Callahan.
No, and I think you summarized it. I think it's a separate issue because we also have to stress this and be an example to the rest of our community, when we're not in our places of work and so forth. And I think that is one thing that we can also do.
Right. Thank you very much.
Hi, Dr. Callahan. This is Commissioner Brooks. Given the, thank you for coming, and really grateful to have you here. I'm also interested particularly in one thing. So you talked about, this is the first time I've actually heard someone in the city at your level recommending that students go back to school. Given the deep racial and sort of divides and how health equities in this city specifically overly burden Black communities, and the fact that we're bringing these students back. So how could you talk to me about, so you said the long-term goal is to address education, but given the current context with historical issues around medical mistrust, health disparities, is it your thinking that by potentially exposing Black young people to a COVID-19 infection, what do you think are some of the long-term health implications of that?
No, that's a tremendous question, and I think the sensitivity there, is key. We are very conscious of the burden that COVID is bearing on communities of color in our city, in our state, and across the country. So there's no question that has to be taken into consideration as well. And even more than that, I think it's the onus is on people like me to make it clear to anyone that asks that this is yet another example of the kind of structural systems that are in place that put those populations at risk and at disadvantage. And I do think it's a very difficult question. It's a very hard one to sort through. And certainly, and I would refer back to Dr. Perkins-Cohen and others, if there were any kind of a change or any kind of, we monitor daily whether people are getting infected in our own sites that we manage. We have to watch very carefully for any kinds of signs that we're having breakdown in the things we put in place. So I think a sensitivity to all the things that you said, at the same time, real-time monitoring, which this program will allow, are the way that we're going to try and find the way between those two extremes.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Chair Chinya, were you going to say something, or do you want me to proceed?
Yes, no, I was just going to ask, I just want to make sure that you can finish up your comments.
Okay. Well, I do want to thank Dr. Callahan. I want to thank the board for engaging, and Dr. Callahan, that real-time data monitoring that you talked about, I think is one of the things that has really benefited us within city schools. And just want to, again, thank you for coming, taking questions, and really just the University of Maryland Medical System for your continual kind of walking alongside city schools during this and really, really prioritizing the work for our kids. So thank you. So with that, I want to again thank all of our partners. And now just turning to our recently announced plan to extend small group in-person learning to an approximately 40 sites across the city beginning next Monday. And I think the context that both Dr. Callahan, Dr. Zaraza brought are incredibly helpful for the board, for the public to see some of how we are being advised, some of the context that we have. We know that these data are naturally a cause of concern for our city. And we are very fortunate that the situation in our school has been different since we began bringing prioritized students back to the classroom this summer. We have included over 1,000 students in our student learning centers since September 28th. I also want to thank and shout out all the board members who have taken the time to come out, visit our learning centers, to see the work in action for themselves. And that really by building on this conservative approach, which has really been marked by a gradual rollout targeted at prioritized student groups, we really have been able to maintain the highest levels of health and safety measures at our student learning sites. This includes consistent implementation, as Chief Perkins-Cohen referenced, of all 5 mitigation strategies that have been recommended for schools by CDC. So the consistent, correct use of masks, social distancing, hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette, cleaning and disinfecting, contact tracing in collaboration with the health department. In the 6-week period since September 28th, we have experienced one case for individuals working or learning at our in-person learning sites. Now, while even one case is absolutely too many, I think our site managers and staff deserve huge kudos for their diligence in maintaining this level of safety. I was out at another 2 centers this morning, and really, even in addition to the one positive case since September 28th, we've also had 0 instances of in-school transition. And so with that, we've already logged really close to, you know, what we call student days in excess of a number of weeks. So on the recommendation of our Health Advisory Committee, we are committing to documenting our ability to maintain the safety of our students and staff through the monitoring that you heard. And we also heard from our public, from our staff, from parents, from families, that having that information transparent is incredibly important for family decision making. And so we are implementing a COVID dashboard specific to our schools, so that in addition to the information that the state began releasing last Friday, we are implementing our own data dashboard, which it will be live this evening. We'll be making improvements as we go in terms of usability, and this will include data, very much like some that Dr. Zaraza referenced this evening, but specific to schools. So it will include data on the number of positive COVID cases by school site, potential cases of transmission, and any closure of learning pods or sites. This dashboard is posted on our website, and we will be updating that as needed to make sure that we are demonstrating and working with a transparent and accountable frame within our constant work to make school settings safe. As we heard from Dr. Callahan earlier, thanks to our partnership with the Baltimore City Health Department and University of Maryland, We will soon be offering on-site testing for any staff or students with COVID-like symptoms. This will also help guide our decisions on quarantining student pods or closing in-person sites. This is really an additional mitigation strategy on top of or in addition to the ones that we heard recommended. And then finally, in recognition of the community conditions in Baltimore City, what we heard from Dr. Zaraza about some of the worsening conditions, and but as well as in keeping with our plan to really extend in-person learning in measured, monitored steps, we have decided to scale back the next phase of small group instruction starting Monday from approximately 40 sites to closer to 25 sites, which were our original target. This decision, along with the opening of our day schools, really aligns with our commitment to expand in-person learning slowly and gradually, as we have done beginning past summer. So in recognition of that, we are going to slow the rollout, but this conservative approach is illustrated by the fact that the expansion to the 27 sites will actually touch about 1,200 students, or a little bit less than 1/70th of our population, or 2%. The revised list of schools is on our website, and really these decisions, this expansion of health measures, safety measures, and the scaling back of the number of sites that we will be opening really does reflect our determination to meet our obligation as educators, to meet the needs of students that require that support, as Dr. Callahan referenced, and then while also maintaining the highest level of safety and accountability for our students, families, and staff. And so with that, I will turn it back over to Board Chair Chinia for the remainder of the board meeting and her comments. Thank you, Chair Chinia.
Thank you, Dr. Santelises, and just a reminder to folks, as you said, that the information that you shared is available on the website, and we would ask that people please take a look at that. And as always, if you have questions, you can send those in, and we will be responding to those. I would like to acknowledge a gift, and this gift was for $5,000 towards the school food pantry, contingency, and meal distribution, and grocery gift cards to Lockham and Bundy Elementary School from Safeway Nourishing Neighbors. And thank you for that. And at this time, I motion to approve the quasi-judicial matters.
So move, Robert.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, McFadden.
Thank you. And those in favor, Commissioner Bondima?
Yes.
Commissioner
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Commissioner McFadden?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm also in favor. No one opposed or abstaining, so that motion carries. Thank you very much. This time I'm going to be reviewing the consent agenda. Board colleagues, please, if you'll let me know if you would like to have an item removed and state your question so that staff can be prepared. We will then act on this after public comment. Item 8.01, appropriation.
This is Reed. I'd like to pull 8.01 and 8.02. 8.01 to get an understanding of the staffing shifts and how we're going to approach the whole technology leadership. 8.02, that's in reference to PPE, barriers, and signage. I guess in terms of the flow of funds, because it necessitates us to shift funds and have a new direction in terms of which possibly we may see in the dashboard. But those two things I like to.
Okay, I'm not certain. What was the question? You just want clarification for 8.02? Is that what you're asking?
Clarification and directing in terms of spending and uses of monies.
Okay. 8.03, the city schools ESSA consolidated strategic plan. 8.04. Yes.
Chair, sorry, Commissioner Roberts. I like to pull 8.03. My question is around if any feedback was received from the outside stakeholder groups, especially from families, by the due date.
Is that all that you want for that? Is information about the feedback?
Yes.
.04 Althea Baltimore request for change in operating structure. Okay. 8.05 gifts and donations. 8.06 gifts and donations. 12.01 equal opportunity schools. 20 language link.
Commissioner Chinya, Commissioner Brooks asked for that to be pulled.
Right, that's what that's what I was waiting, but okay. And that was just for some information, correct, Commissioner Brooks?
Yes, that was just sharing out about the language link service.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Okay, I'm checking time. I know that we commit to starting public comment at 6 o'clock.
Commissioner, Chair, Madam Chair,
Yeah.
did you call 12.02? Maybe I cut my phone off.
No, I did not. I'm sorry, I don't have that. 12.02 is, tell me what it is again.
Irene Incorporated.
Excuse me?
You don't have 12.02 on your list?
Yes, I 12.6. It was in small print, so I did
Okay,
not
that's
see it.
okay.
Yes, so you want to pull
I
that one?
briefly would like them to explain. I wasn't understanding that. Just a quick overview of that, so I can be clear.
Okay.
That's all.
The items that have been pulled is 8.01, 8.02, 8.03, 12.02, and 20.01.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So now I think we're ready to move into public comment. Speakers from recognized groups will have the opportunity to speak for 5 minutes. And first, we have Mr. Zachary Taylor, representing Teachers Union. Mr. Taylor, welcome.
Good evening. So want to begin with even recognizing the reduced reopening plan. The Baltimore Teachers Union maintains that these schools that are reopening should not open while our city's COVID-19 rate continues to skyrocket. Given that we still lack many necessary precautions and the soaring COVID rates, we have no faith the current plans are of our students as we begin to match transmission rates from the spring. And we have a 7-day new case rate average of 27 cases per 100,000 people when you refer to the state's data collection with regard to Baltimore City. The BTU also asked that the new case rate per 100,000 people be the primary indicator to determine school closings, as Montgomery County does and many other counties, as this indicator alone tells us when we have a very high risk of transmission throughout the city, as we do now. And we know that the positivity rate is something that fluctuates for a variety of reasons, not always tied to the indicators that matter most for keeping us safe. And when we take into account the current positivity rate, Baltimore City already has 5 zip codes that surpass the 5% threshold, including some of our city's most populated zip codes. And it appears that other zip codes will be soon at this level as well. And overall, our current rate of transmission would lead to 100% school closures in practically every major school system in the state of Maryland if we were following their guidance. For our own school system, however, the guidance on this question is extremely unclear. For the entire city, we need to know if we maintain this high case rate average and we reach 5% positivity, will in-person schools close? We all deserve an answer to this question, and we hope that this has a place in future discussions in this meeting and outside of this meeting. We're glad to hear from the health commissioner tonight and from the other health expert, and we hope to hear more from these officials in the future, particularly the health commissioner. And we hope that future meetings allow for more time to engage and for questions to be asked by the school commissioners. We are told that the Health Advisory Committee and the Health Department help make decisions about opening and closing and whatever reassessment entails following the state guidance. But we as a staff and what the reassessment process looks like, nor have any reassessment decisions been released to the public, despite passing the reassessment threshold at multiple different points in time, depending on how frequently you would do a reassessment. Again, this is a question where staff, families, and the public deserve to know. We also continue to ask for much greater transparency in posting the COVID-19 cases in our schools, and we see the shift announced tonight to a publicly accessible dashboard as an important step forward in sharing this vitally important information. Nevertheless, we remain concerned about a variety of protocols, including the district's attempt at contact tracing. Just recently, we had a teacher working in a school building test positive for COVID-19, and then they received a limited contact tracing call in which the staff member was just asked if they had been around anyone for 15 minutes. And that was it. That was the question. Surprised at this limited detail and the lack of any notification to this staff member's broader school staff who had also been present in the building at the same time, the teacher took it upon themselves to inform their colleagues they had interacted with to go get tested, to be safe. In addition to improving the contact tracing protocols, we hope that the new dashboard can capture these sort of cases and just that there's a general alert system for all families and staff that work at these particular schools so that they don't have to check a dashboard in the morning to see what happened yesterday in the school system. This sort of communication needs to be shared readily. B2 also wants to draw attention to a really important aspect that we haven't yet done. Appendix H of the district's health and safety guide, which is titled the COVID-19 Awareness Parent-Student Participation Acknowledgement Statement. It's on page 68, and I encourage all board commissioners to go and read it. And in particular, I want to draw attention to the last bullet on page 69. In this document, the school district asks parents to agree to a number of items before their children can participate in in-person learning. In particular, the last bullet point has parents signing off on this statement. I have considered my child's and my family's personal health risk in the decision to attend the city school's activity. I have independently evaluated and reviewed the risk of being exposed to or infected by COVID-19, and I have determined to allow my child to participate in the city school's activity with full knowledge, acceptance, and assumption of all of the above risks. The BTU is not aware of any time in recent history when our school system has gone so far in an attempt to relieve itself from the obligation to create safe and healthy environment for schools. Among many other reasons we don't have to discuss in this forum, including questions of equity, if the district is so sure of its safety guidelines, the system shouldn't be requiring an agreement to language like this. The document makes parents assume risks to the health of their children.
Finish your thought. You're at time.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's requiring parents to assume the risk, and we find that outrageous. Citizens shouldn't have to absolve the government of liability for being provided necessary government services, such as public education. Thank you for the time.
Oh, Chair Cheney, I believe you're muted.
Sorry about that. Our next speaker is Ms. Melissa Schober, who is representing the Parent Community Advisory Board.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Good evening, board members. My name is Melissa Schober. I am a Disability Rights Maryland appointee to the Parent and Community Advisory Board, or PCAB. On October 13th, PCAB addressed the concerns from families regarding both virtual learning and reopening schools for face-to-face instruction. We presented you with a list of points and stressed the need for open and timely communication on points such as how ventilation systems will be initially evaluated, the schedule for reevaluation and evaluation shared publicly, how families, teachers, and the community can report concerns with safety protocols and procedures, and the just announced testing without fear of retribution or shame, how reported concerns will be investigated, remedied, and the remedy communicated, the plan for counseling in the event a student or staff member falls ill or passes away, and critically, the positivity threshold for closing and reopening schools. 2 weeks ago, on October 29th, a presentation before this board included a slide with some metrics for reopening schools for hybrid and face-to-face instruction. The slide had different pathways depending on whether the positivity rate was above or below 5%. No matter the rate, the box at the bottom of the slide indicated city schools would, quote, reassess if the case rate per 100,000 increased by 2 or more and or the positivity rate increased by 1.5 percentage points within 2 weeks. At the time, the slide noted a case rate of 11.3 per 100,000 and a positivity rate of 2.3%. Today, 2 weeks later, our case rate is 20.5, an increase of 9.2, and our positivity rate is 4.2%. An increase of 1.9 percentage points, each well above the guideline presented. PCAB notes that the 20.5 and 4.2% are averages, citywide numbers. As this board knows, Baltimore is a city of neighborhoods, and some zip codes are more heavily burdened by COVID. 21205, 21224, 21206, 21216, and 21230 all have 28-day positivity rates above 5%. I raise these zip codes because they contain schools slated for imminent reopening, including for students who are likely to rely upon MTA for transportation. These students will be traveling through and to communities with high positivity rates on public transportation, where it is not always possible to maintain social distance, including at stops and on platforms, and mask wearing is inconsistent. PCAB again requests information on how this board intends to address compounded risks for such students and their families. PCAB again respectfully requests information on the reassessment process, including clear, consistent, and timely information on the metrics that will be used to close and reopen schools, and the communication process by which families will be informed about closures, reopening, and instances of exposure. Additionally, we request that the Health and Safety Advisory Group hold public engagement sessions where parents in the community are able to ask questions and public health officials who are advising this administration and board, including the 2 who have spoken this evening. As we stated previously, in the absence of complete and reliable information, individuals will inadvertently share half-truths and rumors, leading to confusion, mistrust, and further burdening children and families already under duress. With case rates rapidly rising, it is critical that the district be proactive in engaging families and communities via accessible formats, including 508 compliance, in their chosen language, and to make clear that education and safety are both appropriately prioritized. We look forward to responding in a timely fashion, and we appreciate your attention to our questions and concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schober. I'm going to now turn it over to the board executive for public comment. We don't have any other of our recognized groups that are speaking tonight. Mr. Gant?
Thank you, Chair Chinya. I'm going to do things a little differently. Just for our members of the public who are new to commenting, we're going to go in order. However, I just want to read the names of who signed up to comment, just so you know that we're getting to you. So we have commenting live Miss Patricia Reed, Miss Stephanie Mills, Miss Soleil Taylor, and Mr. Antonio Dismal. So we are getting to you, but we need to go in the order that the public comment was received. And we also have a video of a person who signed up in time for the forum last Thursday, but we were not able to show the video due to translation. However, we now have the translation, so I'll be showing that video after the public comment. So our first member of public comment is Ms. Rebecca Yanaway, and she submitted a video.
Hello, school board members and district staff. I just wanted to share a couple things tonight. First, I want to reiterate the hope that you will support a delay in the reopening of in-person school. As cases of COVID rise, this return to in-person learning is too big of a risk for teachers and families. We know that some families are struggling more than others in this time, and some desperately want to go back. But we urge you to focus on how else we can meet the needs of those who are not served well by virtual learning. The second issue I'd like to bring to you today is the new board practice of not responding to testimony offered at school board meetings. I understand that this is an effort to create equity so that some people do not get more back and forth from the board, while others get little to none. I would urge you to consider an alternative approach, where instead of responding to no one, you respond to everyone who testifies. This is why. Imagine you have something to say. Imagine that you have mustered the courage to say this thing to the people who have the power to influence change. When something affects your child and you go through the hoops to be able to share your concern, but that concern is met with silence, how would this make you feel? Would you feel heard? Would you feel that your concern is taken seriously? If the school system and the board would like to foster positive communication with community, parents, and teachers, as I believe you do, how does this practice create this reality? Thank you.
Okay, next there's an email from Mr. Paul Strong and he has a child at Claremont High School. Give me one moment. Okay. This says positive feedback from a parent who sent their child back for in-person learning. Eager to learn, doesn't like the computer, loves interacting with classmates and teachers. It gives him a better learning experience that he needs hands-on teaching with his intellectual disabilities. Overall, he just does better with going to school. That gives him something to look forward to. Okay, next we have commenting live, Miss Patricia Reed. Are you on? I believe she may have been having some issues, so we might have to come back to her. Okay, we'll come back to Ms. Reed. Next, we have a video from Ms. Crystal Worrell.
Hello, school board, Dr. Santelises. I am Crystal Worrell, the secretary at school number 384 Creative City Public Charter School, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the secretaries. I was just wondering why we are still reporting. I know that you had some things that were listed for the reasons why, and pretty much a lot of those things are requirements that we can do at our home, still feel safe. Some of us feel like we are in the front field. The other duties as assigned is a broadened thing. The printing is the only thing we may not be able to do at our homes. Some of us do not have printers, but we have devices, we have call forwarding. Everything is either digital or virtually. I just feel like sometimes our lives don't feel important as the other colleagues or students or staff, whatever it may be. I feel that we're in the first line of defense always. Some of our sister secretaries, maybe a gentleman or two, have filled out accommodations. Some of them have been denied. I'm just trying to understand and get a better clarity of what it is exactly we are doing in the building. We are not registered nurses, doctors, MPs, RNs, LPNs, CNAs, GNAs. We have none of those titles behind our name. Yet and still, we are welcoming people in the building. We are taking temperatures. We are asking COVID questions. And we don't know whether the people are telling the truth or not. But, you know, I just feel like it's still a safety issue for us. I know that we are not essential personnel, but we're in the building. We don't receive hazardous pay, but we're in the building. So I would just like for someone to give us some sense of clarity of why, since, you know, we received the letter from Chief Skinner and from our principals that we had to report back in the building. The main reasons why, because I truly believe, like other secretaries, that we could be doing these jobs and tasks from home. So we can feel better about ourselves and not feel, you know, stressed or depressed or any of those feelings. I thank God that I don't have any underlying health conditions, but I know some of my colleagues do. And just give us a sense of security. We feel like we're important and we're crucial to the schools, but at this time, it just feels like we're just thrown out there to the wolves. And we are not feeling so safe that we should be still reporting.
Okay. Next up, there is an email from Ms. Suzanne Zilberfarb. Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Suzanne Zilberfarb, and I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Agricultural Education Foundation. We promote agricultural literacy and opportunities for agricultural education and support Mr. Beagle and the Ag program at Reginald F. Lewis. We believe that now is the time to double down on ag education in our schools. The opportunities are meaningful, good-paying careers in Maryland agriculture are endless, and they start with a solid foundation of ag education. In the greater Baltimore area, there are more than 3,750 farms that produce more than 400 million in output each year. Each of these farms relies on a support system that multiplies the numbers of careers, from veterinarians and vet techs to nutrient management planners, nonprofit organizations, to farm credit loan managers, to crop protection specialists, equipment repairmen, extension and education, inbound salesmen like fuel, equipment, and feed reps, and outbound salespeople like groceries, restaurants, and vineyards. Baltimore City's ag science programs have enabled a new generation of students to explore the many careers available and prepare for career in college through a number of established programs. Baltimore City's own urban ag movement has been growing by leaps and bounds, creating a new generation of entrepreneurs who are also working on social change, building economic opportunity, providing fresh local food to the city's food deserts, and empowering children and adults to take charge of their health through nutrition. Through USDA Pathways programs, students become interns for the federal government at age 16. Through the Department of Defense Smart Scholarship Program, students in environmental science are eligible to receive full tuition plus $25,000 in guaranteed employment from the Department of Defense. These are paid internships. There are paid internships available at Great Kids Farm and numerous scholarship opportunities available provided through Maryland FFA. For students interested in state level programs, the University of Maryland offers the Institute of Applied Agriculture, which prepares them for work, associate's or bachelor's degrees in agricultural studies. Statewide, there are at least 13 colleges and universities in Maryland which offer ag or environmental studies. For students interested in Earn While You Learn, the American Landscape Institute will pay for 80% of the students' tuition at CCBC to earn an associate's degree in sustainable horticulture while gaining valuable on-the-job experience. According to the National Chicken Council, the broiler industry on Maryland's Eastern Shore employs more than 6,800 people with jobs paying an average of $52,100 in wages and benefits. The environmental engineering tech, sorry, there's some interference. Sorry, give me one moment. Can everyone please mute your phone? Okay, thank you. The environmental engineering tech role has more than 7% growth and an annual salary of $50,000 a year. The agriculture contractor role has over 7% growth rate and a salary of $61,000 per year. With these opportunities available, it is incumbent upon Baltimore City Schools to expand the number of opportunities students have to study agriculture and environmental sciences. Next, we have Ms. Stephanie Mills commenting live. Ms. Mills, are you available?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You have 3 minutes.
I just went out. Can you see me now? Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't see you. If you want to turn your camera back on.
I don't know what I did with my camera, but I don't want to waste the time. My name is Stephanie Mills, and I have a 12-year-old son who goes to Woodholm Elementary Middle. In the beginning, I was one of those parents that said I wouldn't dare send my son to school. The risk was too great. 8 months later, my son has been hospitalized at least 4 times. Anxiety and depression has taken over. Recently, he has been going to a program that for the past 2 days have allowed him in-person contact and one-on-one help with the work. And I've noticed a change in his behavior. He's more lively. What I've also noticed is that the younger children and the older children have options where the ones between grades 6 and 8 have no options. So what I would like for everyone to think about, though my son's mental health is getting better, what about the physical health? And I don't want to risk his physical health and ignore the mental health. So what option do we have for children who just need in-person learning, in-center learning? What options do they have? Because I feel like his options have been none. And though I've reached out to many people, and I want to say his school, the Baltimore School Board, everyone has reached out. Everyone is working hard to come up with a solution that is not easy on no one. I just want everyone to think about those children right now in middle school who are struggling, who need some kind of help, who don't want to be left out, who is feeling the pain just as we are. Thank you.
I'm sorry, look, I was on mute, excuse me. Next, we have Ms. Salai Taylor. Thank you, Ms. Mills. Salah, you available?
Yes, it's Soleil.
Soleil, I'm sorry. Thank you for correcting me. You have 3 minutes.
I was asked to come here as for myself to advocate for the agriculture program at Reginald F. Lewis and around Baltimore City schools. The agriculture program has been a major help to me in my years of going to high school. Well, excuse me. But this is my last year. My name is Soleil. I'm a 12th grader. The agriculture program has helped me realize my career goals, which is now to be a veterinarian. And without the agriculture program at my school, I would not be going to my first choice school now, which is University of Maryland, College Park. The program has been beneficial to a lot of students around the school that I've seen, because I've seen students who don't even go to their normal classes come to agriculture. Students who don't enjoy science or math come to agriculture to learn about what agriculture is and how it's not just what people assume it to be. Because I've seen students come in saying agriculture is only about farming and animals and whatnot, but it's so much more than that. It makes up a very large workforce in Maryland, such as in 2019, according to the USDA, there was 2.2 million full and part-time jobs, which make up 10.9% of the total US employees, all of which are from agriculture. Excuse me. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
It's okay, Ms. Taylor. If you would like, we can. You have a minute. You have about a minute and a half left. We can come back to you if you'd like. If you want to rethink your thoughts.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. All right. We'll come back to you. Thank you. Next, I see Ms. Reed, Ms. Patricia Reed. I see your phone number. Are you on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Reed. You're on. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. I just want to say that I have my grandsons, and the youngest one is 8, and he has learning disabilities, and he goes to Thomas Johnson Elementary. Well, they had a program start at Bay Brook for the Learning Center, which has been absolutely a godsend. They need these programs for these children. Them workers over at them school, the teachers, the principal have been great with these children. I've seen a difference in my grandson also. He has a lot he needs to structure in school. I'm an essential employee. I understand about all this COVID, but they have to come up with something for these children. They cannot do this virtual. I have another grandson who's in the 8th grade, an excellent student, and he's even struggling. It's hard for them, but believe me, anyone that says a teacher anyone that says they don't appreciate a teacher is lying. But that program is especially essential for these children, for any age of child. They are just, you see the difference in them when they get to go to school, they're around their other peers, they see teachers, they have programs, and they're learning. They're not learning on the virtual. The structure for him, now some students may, but the programs are absolutely necessary. And I thank you all from the bottom of my heart for Tyler.
Thank you, Ms. Reed.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Antonio Dismal. I see you in the guest list.
It's Dismal.
Dismal. Okay, thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Antonio Dismal, and I'm from Reginald F. Lewis High School. I am a junior, and basically, the agriculture department at my school has changed my life. It's crazy how much it did. I went to high school not really caring about school or anything. I just wanted to hurry up and get it over with. But when I got to school and I was put in agriculture, like everything, it changed me like in the 360. It was like instance. So agriculture has got me in multiple programs to, for college and me to boost my education, such as now I'm partnered with the Y of Maryland, and they are offering me free tuition for any college in Maryland because of me, talking and starting to go out more, talk to more people. And it's just changed a lot for me. And now I'm also in different programs such as Baltimore Beyond Plastic, which is a program that I'm with, and basically we just go around teaching everybody. And without the agriculture department at my school, I probably would never found out anything about that. Also, I'm also getting other internships with the USDA USDA, and that's another thing. Without the agriculture department, I wouldn't have that chance. And it's just crazy how everybody wants to take it away now because they feel like it's not needed when it's one of the most important things that changed me as a person. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dismel. Ms. Taylor, back to you. Do you want to use the rest of your time?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
the last thing I would like to mention is the agriculture program has been beneficial to more than just myself. And even now, I will be applying to the name of the program. I have it here. A paid internship with the, I can't find the name. I wrote it down. With the USDA. I'm working with them very soon. I began filling out the application yesterday. So I'm working with them in a veterinary internship to help further my education and to get more experience into my future field.
Oh, Ms. Taylor?
Sorry, my connection is going in and out. That's all I have to say, but thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. So that was everyone who signed up for public comment. As I mentioned earlier, we had 2 parents who submitted comments for the district reopening forum last night, but we were not able to share their comments due to needing a translator. One was in Swahili. However, the audio that came in, we weren't able to use it, so we are still working on that. But we do have a translation for Mr. Ramat. So I'm going to play his video, and then I will read the translation.
بله سلام علیکم از منم قسمت الله رحمت دی به هدیه رحمت احسان الله رحمت او رشنا رحمت پلاریم زما اولادونه د مراویه مکتب کې درس وایي او دوی ډېر دې ته لیوال دي چې درسونه په ښه توګه سرته ورسوي زحمت وباسي نو کله چې د کرونا وایرس په ټوله دنیا کې خپور شو نو لکه نور انسانان زما اولادونه هم هر وخت په کور کې وو او اکثرا درسونه یې انلاین ویل مګر دلته څو مشکله موجود دي یو مشکل دا چې انلاین درسونه زده کول ډېر مؤثر دوی ته نه تمامیږي نو دوی غواړي او زه هم هیلهمند یم که چیرې دوی ژوند ته د کرونا وایرس په اثر کوم تاوان نه رسیږي نو که چیرې دوی بیرته مکتب ته وغوښتلی شي او عملي درسونه په مکتب کې دوی تعقیب کړي دا به هم د دوی په ګټه او هم به دوی ډېرې زده کړې په ښه ډول سره سرته ورسوي یو بل مشکل په کور کې دغه دی چې اکثرا زموږ وای فای سیستم چې دا هغه ډېر ضعیف دی او دوی نشي کولی په ښه ډول سره خپل درسونه تعقیب کړي دریم مشکل دغه ده چې دوی اکثرا په کور کې پاتې کېدل اگر چې موږ کوشش کوو چې مازدیګره پارک ته ووځو او وګرځي دوی په اصطلاح پلی تګ وکړي مګر بیا هم د ماشومانو دپاره دا یو سخت وخت دی چې دوی د لوبو نه دوی د ساتیریو نه بې برخې دي زه هیلهمند یم که چیرې حکومت لازم وګڼي او د کرونا وایرس دوی ته خطر ایجاد نه کړي نو غواړم چې دوی بیرته خپلو مکتبو ته لاړ شي او درسونو ته ادامه ورکړي زما د ټلیفون شمیره 443 Salor sefer sefer, shpak pinza, ua dre. او زه له تاسو ټولو مننه کوم چې زما د اولادو سره کومک کوئ د مکتب د مسؤلینو نه او د معلمین صاحبانو نه د ټول نه مننه کوم چې زما اولادونه په ښه ډول سره روزل کیږي او هر وخت دوی دې ته متوجه دي چې څنګه وکولای شي زما اولادو ته کامل کومک ورسي. زه بیا هم ډېره مننه کوم او خواهش لرم چې زما دغه پیشنهاد تاسو په غور سره واورئ که چیرې امکان لري دوی خپل مکتبونو ته ادامه ورکړي چې نو وای فای ضعیف دی په کور کې. ډېره مننه، ټولو ته ښه وخت او خوشحاله ژوند غواړم.
Okay, I'm going to read the translation. Hello, my name is Kesmatullah Ramat, father of Hadia Ramat, Asanullah Ramat, and Brishna Ramat. My kids are studying at Moravia School, and they try their best and are committed to their studies. After the coronavirus has spread out in the world, like all other people, my kids were at home studying online, but there were some problems. One of them is that online learning and study is not that effective, and if there's no threat to the lives of my kids by the coronavirus, it will be good to restart and ask kids to join classroom studies as it will help them learn better. Another problem at my home is that our Wi-Fi connection is weak, so my kids cannot follow the lessons very well. The third problem is that however we try to take the kids out to the park for a walk, but that is still hard time for kids that as they are deprived of group play. If there's no threat from coronavirus and the government thinks it is necessary, I want them to go back to schools and resume their studies. I thank you all helping my kids, from the school management and teachers. I thank them as my kids are trained properly and they always focus on how they can provide complete support for my kids. I again thank you very much, and I request you hear the suggestion seriously, and if possible, they continue their school studies at school as the Wi-Fi is so weak at home. Thank you so much and wish you all a nice time and a happy life. And Chair Chinya, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Gant, and thank you to the folks who submitted and spoke with us this evening. I can assure you that, as always, board members listen very carefully to your comments. To my fellow board members now, based on the public comments, are there any additional items that anyone would like to pull from the consent agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve items 8.05 and 8.06?
So moved. Reed.
Thank you, Commissioner Reed. Is there a second?
Second, Bandima.
Richardson.
Okay, I got Bandima first. And these items, this is those who are in favor. This is 8.05 and 8.06. Gonna ask if you're not one of the board members, if you please put your phone on mute. Okay, Commissioner Bandima, are you
Yes.
in favor?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks, thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner McFadden?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts?
Yes.
Commissioner Sykes?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm in favor. This motion passes. We have 8 in favor and 2 absent. I just and is there a motion to approve the remaining consent agenda items, and that would be 8.04 and 12.01. Those are the remaining ones that were not pulled.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second, Reed.
Commissioner McFadden, is there a second?
Reed seconds.
Reed, thank you. And those in favor, Commissioner Bondima,
Yes.
Brooks,
Yes.
McFadden,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
and I'm in favor. No opposed or abstain. That's this motion also carries as 7 in favor and 2 absent. Now I'm going to go back to the items that were pulled. The first one was 8 point. Well, there were 2 that were, I think you asked for together, Commissioner Reeve. 8.01, the supplemental appropriation.
Yes. Yeah, my questions have to do with the
and 8.02 also. So we have staff who can respond to those 2.
Board Chair Chinia, can you hear me, ma'am?
Thank you, Chief Doherty. Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Reed, did you
hello?
Commissioner Reed, would you?
Yes, Commissioner Reed, did you want to expand anymore? Are you okay? Just to look at the answers? Okay.
Yes, and sir, I guess the first question deals with the fact it looks like 8.01, we're offshooting some technology expertise. I guess my question is, how does that reframe and restructure the whole leadership structure for the technology area? And also, is that a case where we're having someone serve as our leader in technology being off-site versus a permanent employee?
Understood. I think I understand the question, Commissioner Reed, and I'm happy to explain that in this case, the purpose of that supplemental appropriation is actually entirely focused on our long-planned adoption, evaluation, and implementation of a new ERP system, enterprise resource planning system. And it is very common with large-scale ERP adoptions like this to bring in some temporary IT resources specifically for this really important period when you're putting in a new ERP system with all that entails, payroll, budget, human capital, you name it, the whole shooting match. And the very people that you need, the cadre of IT professionals who are going to person that system over the next X years, they need to go and get fully immersed in that system. But meanwhile, what happens is those are always your best people, and they have huge amounts of day-to-day responsibilities to make sure that the systems work. So what happens here, and it is very common in these circumstances, is you bring in significant resources. The amount of money that you saw and that you were asking for is well over $1 million. So it's a significant amount of money. You bring in the hired guns to do the day-to-day work that our internal experts normally do, while those same cadre of internal ITD experts get up to speed, which takes a while in any case on the new ERP system. And also the source of funds, Commissioner Reed, this is from FY20. It was what we carried over, a small amount of money that we carried over. It's in assigned fund balance. So this has been earmarked for it. And that's the backup. But in no way is this either officially or unofficially meant to bring in people who will stay with us after the ERP adoption period is over. It's to augment the talent that we already have.
Thank you.
Sure.
You said most of the funding has been earmarked.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. What I can add there is ITD is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting, as you can imagine, with an ERP adoption by its very nature. At the same time, we've also squirreled away another $1 million plus because the same logic that I just tried to describe that happens in ITD also happens in human capital, it happens in payroll, it happens in benefits, which means to say the very people that need to become expert in the new system can't leave their day jobs for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. So this million, the number that you see in there, 1.481 and some other, they have, but the rest of us added up will also be about $1 million plus. And for the same idea, bringing in people, for example, to make sure payroll goes smoothly while the director of payroll learns the new ERP system. So you'll be seeing another one of these, frankly, and it will be with assigned fund balance funds, and it'll be, we'll probably do it together when we do the other offices. It'll be about the same size.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Of course, sir.
Commissioner McFadden, did you want to speak?
No, ma'am, I didn't have my hand.
Oh, okay. Okay, no problem.
And Commissioner Reed, I can jump in if you'll allow me on the PPE question, your second item.
Yes.
Okay.
Because my second item is, I think we have 8 million earmarked. We're spending 3.73 this time. And I guess the question is, just what's the big picture of what we're doing here?
Well, you're first of all, you're exactly right that the amount that we had earmarked for PPE, which is masks and barriers and signage and desk shields, et cetera, was 8 million. This tranche would leave 4.2731 million, as you point out. And generally, what we're doing is, as you would expect, when we working with operations, working with the other departments, we get a sense of what the needs are going out into the future. In this case, using PPE, working with Dr. Lynette Washington and her team, and we'll have meetings and she'll come up with an estimate of what we need, always erring on the side of more rather than less for the next quarter, for example. So this particular purchase is
no, I want to see on our media list, do we have a number for Erica Green?
This particular purchase is for PPE going through the next quarter. So I guess through January 29th, just for PPE. And what we do is we first, frankly, look at money that's expiring. When we get the idea from Dr. Washington, what she needs, we'll look and go through a kind of a decision tree of, is there any appropriate money that's about to expire? And if there is, we use that. And then after we go there, we would go to the CARES Act funding. And in this example, again, we've essentially exhausted PPE related money from the CARES Act, as we knew we would. So this represents the first chunk that we're taking out of what you might call the COVID assigned fund balance from FY20. So when we take this, and we have rounded up, if you will, to be safe. And as soon as but when we need more, you and your colleagues will get another request like this, either from the PPE assigned fund balance or the building safety and enhancements one and the cleaning one, or the connectivity one. And to save you from doing the math, with this basically withdrawal from the assigned fund balance, we will still have 86% of our COVID-related fund balance at our disposal. So this is a significant chunk, 3.7269 million.
Oh no. I think
you froze.
I think we're frozen, yeah.
Okay. I will reach out, and I'm sure he knows, but we'll try to circle back to this.
Hey, I'm good. We can move on.
Okay. All right. So, is it possible that we could do the two supplemental appropriations to vote on those together? Is there any objection to that?
I'm fine. I'd make my motion for approval.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second, Robert.
Thank you, Commissioner Roberts. So we're voting on 8.01 and 8.02. Commissioner Bondima?
Oh,
Are
yes.
you in favor?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner McFadden?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts?
Yes.
And I'm in favor. We have this motion passes. We have 7 in favor and 2 absent. Okay, the next item that was pulled was 8.03. I just want to let folks know that the system has had some technical difficulties today. So I know that there's some things that are happening, but just please bear with us as we work through this one. 8.03 was City Schools, the ESSA Consolidated Strategic Plan, and the question was around feedback. Commissioner Roberts, did you want to add anything?
Yes. Good evening, Casey.
Good evening.
So my questions are literally around feedback. So while I'm clear that this year's submissions did not include a lot of changes, couple questions and or concerns. So one of them is, it was only posted on the district's website, and I didn't happen to see it on any of the other communication channels. So I'm fearful that people were not able to see it, just to be simple. And 2, I'm worried that maybe 1 week was not enough time towards the end of the process, since it is going to MSDE on the 16th. And then 3, which is probably the biggest, is how are we showing our stakeholders that their feedback is valuable so that they feel empowered, that when welcomed, to respectfully offer it. And so it was just those 3 that I was concerned most about with this process. Not particularly the actual goals, but the process of incorporating in community feedback around the district strategic goals. Oh, and I didn't realize my camera wasn't on.
No problem. So thank you so much for your question. And I also know that I received a follow-up question from you as well through Joe Strayek, and tried to provide that to you as well. What I will share with regard to the process, and it has been this way every year, you know, we do try to align our presentations to the board with when everything is due to MSDE and with the amount of time that people need in order to pull together our submission. So I do hear you on the tightness of timeline, and perhaps next year we can consider how we can bump that back a bit to allow for more opportunity. I will say it was launched on the 27th on our district website. It was there, and we were receiving feedback through November 6th. I didn't receive any public feedback. We did email our partner organizations, so our union members, PCAB, CCAC, just reminding them that it was up there, and if they had any feedback to provide, which is what we've done every year prior. In prior years, we have received feedback. We also did a survey last year because the changes were actually so substantial in the way that MSDE was having us design and submit everything. And we did a survey and received some feedback that way. This year was just so very, very different. So my guess is, even if folks read it, to be quite frank, I'm just not sure the kind of feedback on that original narrative was posted that would have been provided, you know? So I think that is just challenging in general. I will also say that with regard to, and I think it's a fantastic question, I feel like we're always asked this whenever we try to get feedback from stakeholders, not just for the master plan, but for other things that we do, you know, how did teacher PD go, for example, right? And being able to then have the follow-up conversation with them to say, thank you for your feedback, and here is how it is informing process, or here's what we're changing as a result of it, right? Feedback is one thing. Actually seeing your voice reflected in next steps and in the way we change things is totally different. So I really appreciate that question. And what I had shared with the board liaison in your question, which I think is also in the presentation, but
the place where I feel as though we have the greatest amount of feedback and engagement with stakeholders is within each individual grant. For every grant that's submitted through the strategic plan, we're asked to indicate how we're engaging stakeholders and how that stakeholder feedback informs ongoing changes and shifts. So each grant has a subsection of it that is designed to target that. What I would love to be able to do, and what I had suggested in that email correspondence, is to really work with the grant partners that submit via the master plan in order to be able to share the nuances of what each of those look like, because it's different for every grant, as some are more school-based versus others that are more centrally held, and we support programs in our schools. So perhaps maybe while not a perfect response, I think is probably the best place to start is looking at those various mechanisms and being able to share back with the board what that looks like per grant.
Absolutely. That sounds great. It seemingly appeared that towards the end of a already finished product, we then ask for community feedback. And if this process actually is including feedback at earlier stages, to your point, if we can show that to our stakeholders that their feedback is meaningful, that it is reflected in the finalized product at earlier stages and not just the last week before it's presented before the state, that it is meaningful. So thank you for adding that context to it.
Oh, of course. And thank you for the question. I really do think that it's spot on. And because this is the main place where we submit our grants, I'd love to be able to make sure that we're illuminating that process, because that isn't a process that just takes place in the last, stretch of the master plan. So I want to make sure that I can work with each grant office to illuminate that for you all, and happy to do so.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, is there a motion then to accept item 8.03?
Madam Chair, so moved.
Okay.
I second it, Madam
Is
Chair.
there a second?
Second, McFadden.
McFadden, thank you. And those in favor, Commissioner Bondima?
Yes.
Commissioner Bondima?
Yes.
Okay. We're doing 8.03, the consolidated strategic plan. Okay, Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner McFadden?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts?
Yes.
And I'm in favor, and this item also passes, 7 in favor and 2 absent. Next item that was pulled was 12.02.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So Dr. Pfeiffer, are you online?
I sure am.
Thank you.
Bondima.
Thank you. This won't be long. Dr. Pfeiffer, you did a lot of work here. I'm just seeing that. And I just had, it was so much work that I just wanted you to kind of give me an overview. Firstly, I wanted to know, and you could just answer and just tell me how many students would be involved in this program, and the $750,000, $789,000 is period over the period of 4 years, or will you be applying for $750,789 each year, for the 4 years? Which one is that?
Thank you so much, Commissioner Bondima, for the questions. First of all, just want to highlight that what Perrin is supporting us with is our individualized student plans. And so these plans will be done by students in 6th through 12th grade, and by every student in those grades. And so our goal is that every student coming through middle and high school at city schools will be able to have an individual conversation with an adult about their interests, about their grades, about their attendance, about what they think they might like to do in the future. And that's something that happens multiple times a year, each year for our young people. To your second question, the contract is up to 7 years, so 3 years with 4 option years following. So we won't be coming back with the same request every year. Thank you for asking.
You know, this is a great program. at some point, I hope you documented everything, because what I would like to see from a program like this is for you to keep good records and show each year how the success rate for each student and the outcome, because this is a new, is this a new program for us?
So we started last year with 6th, 8th, 9th, and 12th grades.
Okay.
We felt really strongly that we needed to begin the work, but we also knew that we didn't have the digital platform, that we wanted to be able to do it really well. And so this is the first year that we're building, you know, should we move forward with this, we would build a digital platform that would allow us to track exactly like you said. And I'm looking forward to it as well. I'm looking forward to being able to see the progression of our students through middle and high school, and to see how we can use the resources in these, or to use the plans to connect our students to college and career resources, opportunities that align with their interests and their passions.
Right, because I see that you said 32%. It was only 32% of the success rate for each of the students. Of the 32%, how many students altogether? Do you know?
I need to double check that, Commissioner Bondima. I want to say it was about 4,000 students, maybe closer to 5,000 students who completed those plans last year. You know, we were interrupted by COVID, and so that is the rate of completion through mid-March.
I understand that. And the program, they ran this program in the other states. Did you get the data on that?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and what was, sorry.
So you're asking about completion rates in other states?
No, you don't have to tell me that right now, but I would be curious to know the completion rate in the other states.
Good evening, Danny Heller, Manager of College and Career Readiness. So Perrin, the entire state of Colorado uses Perrin as part of its statewide academic and career planning system. And so I do not know the exact percentage of students who completed the plan in the entire state of Colorado, but as part of this process, we were excited about what they had done in the entire state of Colorado, and that's what sort of inspired us to put this RFP forward that Perrin eventually won. And so academic and career planning efforts are state laws in places. It's actually part of a state law in places like Wisconsin and Virginia.
Right, thank you. And I did notice that you packaged together several grants, and I hadn't seen Gear Up. I did a Gear Up years ago. I hadn't seen that. But anyway, so all of these grants packaged together equal to $750, right?
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay, so through the years, do you have to continue packaging all of these grants, or can you find a grant from Department of Education somewhere where you could write a grant that would, a $750,000 grant from one Department of Education, or because I don't know if CARES Act will be around. Would you be able to do one grant to cover all of this, or you would have to package all of these grants together to come up with the amount of money that you would need?
That's a great question, Commissioner Bondima. And I think, you know, part of what you see here is that many of the student plans are something that align with a variety of different funding sources and different funders, right? There are many people who see having these plans and these conversations with young people as crucial to student success in the same way that we do. So I think we certainly are always on the lookout for funding sources that, you know, make it easier for us to cover the needs that we have. But I also think that there's a real opportunity for different sources to come together so that we have multiple opportunities to tell the story and to have multiple ways of garnering support for this work. So I think there's an opportunity for us in it as well.
And you know, I'm going to end this, but please pay close attention to the politics behind this in Department of Education. Things are going to be changing, and there's a strong possibility we might have some real good grants coming out of the Department of Education and other departments, Department of Defense, and a bunch of other federal programs. And I'm sure that we'll have a new Secretary of Education. So we might be able to get lucky and have a real good grant that could cover most of this and use the other grant money for another project. But anyway, that's what I really need to know. But thank you, Dr. Pfeiffer. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for your interest, Commissioner Bondima.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to approve item 12.02?
So moved.
So I heard Bondima and McFadden, so I'll do the second between the two of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Bondima, seconded by Commissioner McFadden, and those in favor: Commissioner Bondima,
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks,
Yes.
Commissioner McFadden,
Yes.
Commissioner Reed,
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
and I'm in favor. So this also passes. This item passes, 7 in favor and 2 absent. The last item which was pulled was 20.01 language link. Thank you. Commissioner Brooks, I know you wanted Chief Highcover to just let people know about this.
Yeah, just talk about the program and then the expansion. I think that would be helpful.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. So we brought a procurement item forward today for Language Link. The district has used Language Link for several years now. It is our way of doing immediate translation for families at schools and at district office when families come in who are non-English speakers. Historically, we've had about $20,000 we've dedicated to Language Link in years past. This year alone, we saw a bill in August for $4,000. We saw a bill in September for $20,000 and a bill in October that's forthcoming that we expect to be about $17,000. This language link strategy is part of a larger district-wide translation strategy that my team is trying to pull together to make sure that not only in school-based communications, in our board meetings, for example, where you just heard tonight the fantastic testimony of an Arabic-speaking gentleman, that we are honoring the voices of our non-English speaking families. We've had an increase last school year alone of 28.9% of the number of students who are English language learners in our district. And our district just needs to step up a little different ways to make sure that we are honoring the voice of those students and families, to make sure their voices are heard and contribute to the governance of their schools, but also to engage in the academic success of their children. So we got the bill for September, mid-October. Normally, this procurement item would go through committee. We would do a full RFP, and we just don't have the time right now because of the immediacy of the increase in the bills due to the COVID closure, where we don't have paraprofessionals or others at schools who can immediately translate for families when they show up. It's all being done telephonic or through Zoom or Teams kind of meetings. And so we really need to boost up our ability to provide Language Link to all of our schools. Over the summer months, we had one day where there was a complication with Language Link, and I had so many schools calling asking for that support because it really does limit the ability for schools to communicate directly with families if we don't have this service. So back to the billing. In mid-October, we found out that the bill for September was $20,000. We then began to do an immediate search for a piggyback contract for any other LEA in Maryland that we could join in their contract. We found one with Anne Arundel County. Unfortunately, their contract was a negotiated contract. It was not a publicly bid RFP contract, so we could not piggyback on that contract. We then researched with the Language Link folks to figure out that our October bill, as I just said before, is approximately going to be about $17,000 that will come in shortly. So we have an immediate need to be able to do a procurement item for a contract for Language Link in the amount of $226,000 that will cover us for this entire year. A couple of things to note. One, Language Link provides translation in multiple languages in an immediate way so that families with immediate call in can get connected right away. The second piece of this is that we will do a full procurement bid item for next school year, for the 21-22 school year. This contract will just carry us through this year during the COVID response to make sure we can keep communication lines open with all of our families. We will hopefully in March of 21 begin to do a full RFP for next school year to bid this contract out in the future. So I just appreciate the board's consideration of this, and to help us, it's a serious equity issue that our families are able to really connect to the academic success of their children through either IEP meetings or through general communications with schools, or even calling our enrollment office to make sure that they have access to live translation. I'll stop there and take any questions from the commissioners if you have them at this time.
Okay.
Madam Chair, this is Commissioner Roberts. I'd just like to add, for consideration of my colleagues, I have personally used Language Link as a resource, and I will say that this particular platform allows for over 200 languages, which scales our ability to accommodate our families tremendously, especially during this time. I'm very excited that we're making strides to accommodate our families in this way. So kudos to Chief Heike Hubbard and her team for recognizing this need and scaling it at this time.
And can I also
Thank
add,
you.
Commissioner Roberts, I want to do a quick thank you to the procurement team. Chris Doherty's team has done an amazing job of doing the research and figuring out how to get the board letter and just everything we had to get to pull together along with my teams. I wanted to make sure they were acknowledged as well.
Thank you, Chief Doherty.
Commissioner McFadden, I see you on screen. Oh, okay. You just turned on your camera. All right. Every time you turn it on, I'm ready to call on you. So is there a motion to approve this item for Language Link?
So moved. Brooks.
Commissioner Reed, is there a second?
Second, Roberts.
Thank you. And those in favor, Commissioner Bondima,
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks,
Yes.
Commissioner McFadden,
Yes.
Commissioner Reed,
Yeah.
Richardson,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
and I'm in favor. We have no abstentions and no one opposed, so that this motion also, this item is also approved, 7 in favor and 2 absent. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, commissioners. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you all, folks, for your flexibility tonight. We did change the agenda a bit, so now we're going back to information items. And the first information item that we have is a presentation from the Office of Legal Counsel on policy ACB, sex-based discrimination. Mr. Sivan.
Hi. Hi, this is Josh Sivan. I'm the Chief Legal Officer, and I'm here this evening with Jane Ehrenfeld, who's our new Director of Fair Practices. And I'm going to start, and then Jane's going to follow up. And also, as part of our broader team, we have Dr. Tracy Durant from the Equity Office, who is a key partner in this work. So we had a great conversation in the policy committee led by Commissioner Brooks on this policy, and I've already incorporated a lot of feedback in what we're presenting today for first reader. The goal of the updates is to restart a process that we delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic to update our sex-based discrimination policy and regulations for employees and third parties, such as contractors or parents, which is policy ACB and regulation ACB-RA. So they align with a number of things. One, the corresponding policy and regulation for students, also some recent legal developments, a new Title IX sexual harassment regulation that was issued by the Department of Education, and our ongoing work on equity and to support LGBTQ+ students, employees, and other stakeholders. So I'll go through each of these in turns just to lay out the framework here. So if we flip to the next slide. So first, alignment with policy JBB and regulation JBB-RA. These were path-breaking policy regulation enhancements adopted in April 2019 that confirmed that sex-based discrimination, including discrimination based on gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, and stereotypical notions of masculinity and femininity, are part of sex-based discrimination. And one of the pieces that will feature later on is that we've also gone back and needed to make some updates to JBB and JBB-RA, as you'll see, so that everything continues to be aligned. So let's flip to the next slide. So there also have been some significant legal developments that we wanted to make sure we're reflecting. At the national level, there was a case by the Supreme Court that ruled that employment discrimination based on gender identity, including transgender status and sexual orientation, is covered by Title IX of the Civil Rights Act, which is our nation's key federal anti-discrimination in employment law. And then a decision by the Fourth Circuit, which covers Maryland, it ruled that schools cannot bar transgender students from using bathrooms that correspond with their gender identity. Then in Maryland, we've had recent law that authorizes the use of non-binary gender designations on driver's licenses, and long-standing law in Maryland that guarantees equal opportunity in employment regardless of sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity. So let's flip to the next slide. And then on the Title IX front, as I mentioned before, there's a new regulation, but there are a number of pieces of Title IX of the Education Amendment Acts of 1972, which really promotes equal opportunity in employment and prohibits sex discrimination in employment. There were a lot of existing provisions that were already reflected in our policies and regulations, but I just wanted to confirm that Title IX prohibits discrimination based on sex, also prohibits sexual violence. There are bullet points here. It doesn't prohibit these next two, but it covers sexual orientation and gender identity. And it protects all persons from discrimination, not just students, but also parents, guardians, and employees. So let's flip to the next slide. Also, the existing requirements, and these are important because we need to make sure that our policy has all of these aspects, requires the school district to have a Title IX coordinator to oversee our sex-based discrimination investigations and provides confidentiality to those investigations. So let's flip again. So the new regulation that went into effect on August 14th of this year. This is important because it rescinded prior guidance on sexual harassment and issued proposed new regulations. Lots of comments were provided, pro and con. The final regulation came out in May 2020. School districts and colleges and universities across the country urged a delay in implementation due to COVID-19, but the department was unwilling to delay it beyond August of 2020. There are still some legal challenges pending, but courts have declined to issue relief in this. We will see what a new administration bodes in terms of this, but while it's going forward and as present, we need to comply with it. And it applies to sexual harassment claims filed by students, employees, and other third parties participating in our both K through 12 and higher education programs. So let's flip to the next slide. So just a summary of the new regulations. I'm going to go quickly here, but these slides are available on board docs to go into more depth. So the regulations clarify a number of aspects of sexual harassment policy. And as you'll see, we're applying them in our regulations, both to students and to staff-based complaints. So any person may report sexual harassment, and it confirms that all city schools employees at all school districts are mandated reporters. So what does it mean? That means that they're required to report if they're on notice of an incident of sexual harassment. And then through these regulations, they call a complainant is the individual who is alleged to be the victim, and the respondent is the individual who is alleged to be who has been reported to be the perpetrator or the alleged perpetrator of the conduct. And even if a person who experienced sexual harassment declines to pursue the complaint, It's important that it can still proceed if our Title IX coordinator determines it's significant enough to proceed. So let's go to the next slide. There's also been clarifications of the definition of sexual harassment, and you can see the definition on this slide. Two of the differences are that the definition under prior guidance was that on the second bullet, unwelcome conduct determined by a reasonable person to be so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it effectively denies a person equal access to the district's education program. Prior, it was severe, pervasive, or objectively offensive. So this actually heightened the standard for sexual sexual harassment under the Title IX definition. And then on the other hand, it expanded the definition to include sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence, and stalking. So let's switch to the next slide. So if there's a complaint of sexual harassment, the regulations clarify that city schools must respond promptly and in a manner that's not deliberately indifferent. So what does that mean? We must respond in a manner that is not clearly unreasonable in light of the known circumstances. And we must also treat complainants and respondents equitably. And what does that mean? So we should offer supportive measures as appropriate to both parties and make sure that the grievance process plays its way out before we determine responsibility. So really treat both parties in a complaint fairly as the process goes forward. Let's go to the next slide. So I mentioned supportive measures before. So what does that mean? And it's really the focus of the law, and this is consistent with prior practice in this school district and other school districts, is non-disciplinary, non-punitive measures that are designed to support the student. So this may mean that readjusting class schedules, providing counseling and support so that while the investigation is going on, before the consequences have been meted out, both students involved or all students involved are equitably treated. Next slide. Can we go to the next slide? The other piece of this is that there is a provision that says that if it's a severe enough circumstance, an emergency removal can be justified either for the student or the staff member or other who's alleged to be the perpetrator. Flipping through to the next slide. Next slide.
You gotta wait a minute, Josh.
Oh, I'm going too fast, sorry.
No, I think there's a delay on my computer end, so I'm flipping.
Great. So the rest of the slides here, and I think well, I'm talking faster than the slides are moving, so I apologize to everybody watching here. But there is a very elaborate process in the regulations for how the decision is made after the complaint and investigation is processed. And a key point is that the person making the determination can't be the same person that investigated the complaint. So if an assistant principal investigates the complaint, the principal could be the decision maker, but the principal can't be both the investigator and the decision maker. And then the decision maker must provide information to both the complainant and the respondent about the impact of the decision. So both get the information about the results of the investigation. So now we can switch. There's also clarifications in the new regulations about the importance that all the city schools folks, staff involved in the process, the coordinator, the investigator, and the decision maker, are don't have a conflict of interest or bias for for complainants or respondents in the process. And then I think finally, in terms of the process, there's a clarification of what remedies can be provided, and an important point that we should be thinking in our sexual harassment investigations of what remedies are designed to restore or preserve equal access to the district's educational programs, and focus on the alleged perpetrator if they've determined to have engaged in the act, but also supportive measures for the complainant to make sure that their needs and concerns are addressed. And then also the important point that remedies may include school-wide and district-wide actions like increased training or guidance updates. Next slide. And then there's an appeals process set forth in the regulations, which means that ultimately decisions may be appealed to the CEO and then to the board. Next slide. There's opportunities to dismiss a complaint in certain circumstances if it doesn't rise to the standard set forth in the regulation. But that doesn't mean that the conduct goes unaddressed. So even if it doesn't meet the standard, it still can be addressed under other policies, including the code of conduct. Next slide. And a really important point that there are protections against retaliation, meaning that no city schools personnel or other person may intimidate, threaten, or coerce someone for participating in the process or for purpose of interfering in the process. Next slide. And there's also a provision on record keeping that we retain records of these investigations for 7 years and then also post training materials on our website. Next slide. So that's what in a nutshell, what the regulations provide, the federal regulations. And now I'm going to shift over to my colleague, Ms. Ehrenfeld, to talk about how we've taken all of those provisions, many that were in our regulations already, but made sure that they were folded into both ACB, which remember is for employees and third parties, and then also to JBB, which is for students.
Thank you. So going through these fairly quickly, as you can see, our ACB policy, which is the employee and third party policy, now has the non-discrimination policy added. Next slide. And so the policy ACB now references a number of definitions that are in JBB, including all the ones on this list. And so we wanted to ensure that we're using consistent definitions across policies. Next slide. There are also other definitions that have been updated to align with Title IX regulations, so sex-based discrimination, sexual harassment, third parties, complainant, and respondent. And just to kind of go back for a second, to think about JBB and ACB, there's a real distinction now that you'll see in those policies between sex-based discrimination and Title IX sexual harassment, going back to what Chief Sivan said earlier about that sexual harassment definition being the severe, pervasive, objectively offensive. That's going to put things into that sexual harassment category, but there are plenty of examples of conduct that might fall under sex-based discrimination, and those will still be investigated. They'll just be investigated not using that Title IX process. Next slide. So another thing that was added was, and this is consistent again with JBB, into the ACB policy, we added updates supporting employees' gender identity and gender expression, so including use of pronouns and names, dress codes, access to gender segregated facilities, personnel records, and requesting a name or gender change. We wanted to ensure that the protections that we ensure to students are also available to employees. Next slide. And again, I think Chief Sivan already went through all of this, but we made sure that ACB and JBB are aligned. And of course, we had to make many updates to align with the Title IX regulations. And because Title IX does cover employees, we had to make sure that we had a consistent policy for everyone. Next slide. So again, the new grievance procedures, and this again is just for sexual harassment, Title IX sexual harassment, incorporate all of the new requirements under the Title IX regulations that just went into effect. And so employees have an option, as do students really, and students' parents, to pursue the grievance process either under the bullying and harassment protocol or under the Title IX sexual harassment protocol. And that's something that when a complaint is made, then the complainant will receive information and advice on the two different options and can choose between those options to decide in which direction they want to go. But I will say there's also, when a Title IX coordinator and a principal receive a complaint that could be Title IX sexual harassment, there is the question that they need to ask, does this constitute Title IX sexual harassment under the definition set forth in the regulation in order to proceed down that route? Next slide. So I'm not going to go through all of this. It's all on board docs, but we wanted to kind of give a sense of how an investigation would proceed. Here we've mapped out student on student sexual harassment. And so if there is a complaint that does come in that indicates that a student has potentially or allegedly suffered sexual harassment from another student, we wanted to kind of give a guide to how that investigation would proceed. And as you see in number 2, the Title IX coordinator and the principal or principal's designee are making a determination in the first instance as to whether or not the conduct meets the definition of sexual harassment. If it does not, then there's still, as I said before, the bullying investigative process, and that's really important. It doesn't mean that investigation stops cold. It just means that there's two different routes that it can take, and so that's one of the determinations that gets made fairly early on. Next slide. And then, as I said, I'm not going to go through the whole process, but this just lays out the timelines that are in the regulations. We've had to update some of our timeframes in order to conform with the new regulations. And also, as Chief Sivan mentioned earlier, to ensure due process to both parties and ensuring that they both get notice at the same time, they both get an equal chance to review and respond to the evidence. Next slide. So since September 9th, so since this was presented at policy committee, we have received a number of we've received a lot of feedback from various different stakeholders, and I'll discuss in a minute other stakeholders that we've reached out to. But I just want to run through very quickly some of the updates that we've made since then. We captured all of the feedback and we incorporated it wherever possible into the policies. We updated the definitions of sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence, and stalking, which had previously just referenced the statutory definition, but we expanded to really have those written out in full. We have updated the title of the unit within the Office of Legal Counsel that handles these complaints. We clarified the roles of the Title IX coordinator and the principal. We want to ensure really that principals have the ability to investigate and proceed with these investigations. However, we also want to ensure that information is flowing back and forth with the Office of Legal Counsel. And so we kind of tightened up some of those processes to ensure that that information is flowing back and forth. And then we finally, we clarified that the entire process is expected to take no more than 45 business days from the date of filing. And that really contemplates a lot of the new regulatory requirements for timeframes. Next slide. We also looked at some other policies and other guidance from other school districts and from outside organizations, just to ensure that we were interpreting the regulations in line with what other folks were doing out there and to make sure that we were really understanding the regulations fully. Next slide. And then finally, this is the list of stakeholders we have already reached out to. And we are very open and willing and happy to reach out to other stakeholders. So please let us know if you have other stakeholders you'd like us to send these out to, and we'd be more than happy to. We are in the process of collecting feedback now, and we'll incorporate that feedback as it comes in from all of these various different folks. We've also invited each of these stakeholders to also share with anyone who they can think of who might be able to give us feedback. So we welcome feedback. We understand, we're trying to find the balance between being bound by the new regulations, but also wanting to ensure that our policies at the end of the day work for city schools, employees, and students. So we are very, very open to hearing your thoughts on them. And I think that is the end of our presentation.
Great, thank you. Any questions, comments from board members? I see Commissioner Roberts, is your hand raised, or you were taking it down?
No, but Commissioner Brooks' hand raised.
I do see Commissioner Brooks, yes. Okay, Commissioner Brooks?
Yes. So first of all, I wanted to thank you both. Jane, welcome to the team. We're excited to have you. Thank you for incorporating the feedback that we've seen. And there were just two things that I had a question about. So I know that for some of us, and if, Chief Seven, if you could just kind of give some more context about this, that these changes and regulations have been a little bit contentious, partly around how the field of, particularly around sexual assault, has sort of characterized what the experience was versus these new regulations that were incorporated by Betsy DeVoe. And so if you could talk a little bit about that, and also I heard there's some inkling that possibly that there might be, with a Biden-Harris ticket, a rolling back of this particular frame of this particular regulation, as Betsy DeVoe had sort of materialized it in terms of education. So if you could just give us some context, and if you think it's still best practice, or and really what this means for us, if that change does happen, or that reversal.
That's a great question, Commissioner Brooks. And I think the timing here is something that we're definitely juggling. So there was a period in the summer where we thought that maybe a court would put in place an injunction or some sort on the new regulations. And so we were monitoring that initially. When that didn't happen, we felt compelled to move forward. And I want to make sure that I don't lose a nuance here. There are some pieces of this that are very important for us to move forward with, regardless of what happens. So for instance, we want to, and Jane mentioned, we want to make sure that we align our employee policy with our student policy and provide the strong and important supports against discrimination based on gender identity, that we want to provide clear statements of support for our LGBTQ stakeholders who are employees in the same way as we currently do for students. So all those pieces, I think we would want to, and indeed we were moving forward with well before the regulations. Then in addition, there are changes that we needed to make to our enforcement processes and clarifications, which when we've talked to staff and other stakeholders, the clarity here is important. So I think those provisions would move forward regardless. Then, in addition, as Commissioner Brooks rightly points out, there were some elements of the new regulations that the Department of Education put in place that were quite controversial. One is just that they largely focused on sexual harassment claims at the college level. And they put in place a lot of procedures. You saw the flow chart that Jane mentioned that has a lot of steps in it, which are challenging, to be perfectly blunt, to apply at the middle school level and certainly at the elementary school level. And there were a lot of comments about that from K through 12 school districts, stakeholders. So I think that there is some hope that another look at this in the new administration may provide additional recognition of the differences between the K through 12 level and colleges and universities. And then there was a perception that, and both Jane and I referenced it, that the standard for a sexual harassment complaint has been elevated in these regulations compared to what it once was, and what it frankly is still in Maryland law. And so there's some tension there. So I think that one of the things that on those last 2 points, we're going to be monitoring very carefully as this goes through the reader process. And if there would be an option to reconsider, I think we will come back to the board at the second reader process. Maybe if it's appropriate, go back to the policy committee. But we feel like we need to move forward with the key parts of this that we would change regardless, while sensitive to that there are some pieces that if we have flexibility, we would love to change. But on the pieces that I just mentioned, as long as the regulation stands, those become federal law, and it would be very difficult to, and it put us in a difficult spot if we weren't moving forward based on what currently federal law is. That was a lot, I know, but does that make some sense in terms of providing a context for the answer?
Yeah, totally. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for the work.
Okay, any other comments? Hearing none, thank you.
Thank you all, and thanks for the feedback that we've already received.
Okay, so we will be coming back to this, correct? Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to ask folks who are with us this evening, if you're not speaking directly, if you could turn your cameras off so that we can really concentrate on the presenters and board members. And I think our next information item is from the Office of New Initiatives for the annual school review.
Good evening, Board of Commissioners. I'm Angela Alvarez. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of New Initiatives. I am getting the presentation up, so just bear with me a second. Okay, so I have the honor of presenting this year's annual review recommendations. These are a set of recommendations that impact the entire district. I want to, before I get into the recommendations, I want to thank the team of people that work on this. This is a cross-functional team that impacts and has representatives from every department in our district. The work here is hard. And it takes a lot of commitment out of a lot of people. So I want to especially thank Chief Lynette Washington and her team, in particular, Dr. Stewart's team and Dr. Stewart, as well as Cindy Smith and her team. I also want to thank Chief Davis and his team, in particular, Quilla James, Dawn Shirey, Dr. Pfeiffer. I want to thank Chief Hubbard and her team, in particular, Brandon Tillman and Dominic Bivens. I want to thank the whole comms team who's working hard, even at this moment as I'm speaking, getting the updates to this. It just takes a lot of effort. I want to thank my team. Lindsay Anderson has been hard at work at pulling all of this together for tonight. It's just a lot of people that put a lot of thoughtful work into this. We keep learning and growing. And so I hope that you see some of that in what we share tonight. And anyone I forgot, I apologize, but I thank you. It's just a lot of people help put this together and to really think through these things. As a district, we have a vision and goal that's around ensuring that every child, every student in our district deserves and we must provide a high quality educational experience that supports their learning, their personal growth, creating places where our students are thriving, and when they graduate from us, when they leave us, they have the skills, the knowledge, and the understanding to succeed in college, careers, our community, or wherever their dreams may take them. One of the big things that we've been doing as a portfolio team at the urging of community members that we have been working with in prior years of doing this review was to really consider and to hold some guiding questions to make sure we're being thoughtful about this work. And it came from a recommendation from a community member, Khalik Sims, I'm going to name her, to read a book called Ghosts in the Schoolyard, which was written by Eve Ewing. It focuses on Chicago's process of how they do these kinds of recommendations, and in particular, the closure of schools. And so we've been reading that as a team and using that to inform and continue to push our work. And it gave us certain guiding questions that were things we were honestly thinking about before, but it's helping to deepen the way that we think about these things, and we're continuing to learn and grow. And so it has some, I'm not going to read them all, they're here, but helping us think about the context, the history that shapes what's happening to our school communities. A lot of the recommendations we're going to talk about tonight are driven based on enrollment declines, that there's a lot of factors that go into enrollment declines, and a lot of them have to do with just how our neighborhoods are set up and what's happening in school communities that's rooted in kind of the systemic injustices that face communities of color. And so being mindful of that, and how do we push against the inertia of that, and that we are really understanding the importance of these institutions as we make these major changes. And that when we have to make the hard decision around closing, that we're doing it in a way that is respectful of a school community, that honors the school community, and that minimizes the trauma. Closure can feel like an erasure, and it's a loss. It's a loss of connection to actual people and relationships that have existed, as well as to the idea of what a school represents in a community. And in thinking about how power, race, and identity shape these processes and the decision making, and how we can more and more and more be doing and developing recommendations with communities rather than doing things to school communities. So those are some of the guiding things that have undergirded the work that we're doing around this process moving forward. And you'll see that in some of the things that we've done. So one thing is a language thing. We're not perfect. Like our web address for where people send questions to you guys as the board, as well as us as the staff, still says portfolio, but we're actually shifting from using that language because it centers or connotes a primacy to numbers or to mathematics or to like quantitative data, which is what you see when you look at these kind of processes nationally. There's an overemphasis on quantitative data and not enough of a balanced look of looking at both quantitative and qualitative data. And that qualitative data isn't just, like a survey or focus groups, those things matter, but what communities are saying to us, what communities are expressing, their lived experiences. And so we have decided to shift away from calling this the portfolio review, and instead are calling it the annual school review of schools, as we continue to think through this. And some of the things we've done to show that shift, we've been, again, like I said, thinking about this over time, even before reading Ewing's book, was expanding the timeline. The process used to happen very quickly. It was like November, we would share the recommendations, and December, you would vote. So we've spread the process out, the legal formal process. So it's spanning over months and not a few weeks. Additionally, we stay and we hold on to and work with communities through these transitions. So leading into the recommendations and a year or 2 years after, to make sure that commitments that you make as a board are actually delivered upon within those communities. Again, we have been doing more and more work in centering and focusing on communities when we can, as much as we can. One of the big things that as Baltimore that we need to be proud of and we need to talk about and we need to celebrate is when we have closed schools, and many of tonight's are actually driven by the 21st Century Schools Project. But even outside of that, we've intentionally also invested in those schools communities. Often when there's a school closure, it's an absence and that's it. But we have, where we've had to close and merge school communities, invested in those school communities. And we focused on school communities that were and have been continually and historically underserved and under-resourced. And so we need to be proud of that. You know, the 21st Century Buildings Plan is not something that is, you know, I've seen anywhere happening at the scale that we're doing it, and in the places where we're doing that investment, which is so meaningful to our students because it also symbolizes our commitment to them. The other thing that we're working on is figuring out better ways to maintain our history as city schools, as well as the history of our school communities and the legacy of those school communities when there are major changes like closures or you know, facility surplus and mergers. How do we maintain and not lose that history with those changes? And so this is an area where we're growing and increasingly focused on, and we'll continue to be kind of talking about that with you as a board during this school year and beyond. This shows you is a rendering of Walter P. Carter and Lois T. Murray, which will be opening soon. One of the big things that Dr. Washington's team has been able to do is help us maximize and really think about how we use our capital improvement funds to increase the number of schools that are getting improvements and doing it in a focused way. So earlier this year, with the leadership of Cindy Smith, Graceland Park O'Donnell Heights Elementary Middle School and Halliburton Academy opened this fall and new spaces, quality buildings. And so that deserves kudos and recognition and is important. It gets us closer to that quality facility and quality education for every child. In addition, Mary E. Rodman opened this fall. This January, we'll have Medfield Elementary and Walter P. Carter opening in their renovated spaces. They both schools that are going through the 21st Century Plan go through a principal selection process to make sure there's a strong leader in place. They go through an academic re-envisioning process to select a focus area and professional development around academics and climate. And so for these, both of these schools happen to select STEAM or science, technology, engineering, arts, and math as their focus areas. And you see a rendering of what the new Medfield Heights Elementary School will look like. This is a big year. By right now, we have 15 21st century schools already completed and open. But by the fall of next year, we'll have 23 of the 28 schools open. So Lois T. Murray will be on that list. Calverton Elementary Middle, Govins Elementary, Hartford Heights and Sharp Leadenhall, Patterson High, James Mosher, and Robert Coleman. So a number of schools opening in those new spaces with all of that work that I talked about. And again, these are, you know, in communities that have been historically under-resourced. This is where we've put our resources, which is in the right place. So I'm going to get into the list of recommendations for this year. I want to make sure that I share that timeline. So today I'm presenting all of the recommendations at this public meeting. There are two opportunities for members of the public to provide oral testimony directly to the board. That's December 2nd from 6 to 8 p.m. and December 16th from 7 to 9 p.m. There'll be a virtual meeting just like this. You'll join just like how you joined this meeting to be able to participate in that. Members of the public can also send written testimony to the board. It needs to be sent by January 8th at 5 p.m. in order for the board to consider it before they vote on January 12th. Additionally, there will be meetings with school communities where there are COMAR recommendations pending with those school communities. If you're a member of public that's listening to this presentation, not only is this presentation on the district website, there is a full complete report called the Annual Review Report that's been delivered to the board. and is available to you as a member of the public on the district website. There's a summary of all the recommendations I'm going to share tonight. And there are letters for each school community that gets into how to participate in all the meetings, including the ones that are happening within school communities. So please take a look at those materials so that you have more detailed information. What I'm presenting is a summary of all of the factors. If you want to understand the complete factors, please read the report. The report also goes into a lot of the work that we're doing in a district around this process and around how we district-wide increase our ability to meet the needs of students. So tonight I'm going to share 3 recommendations for school closure and surplus, 1 relocation and surplus recommendation, 1 relocation, grade configuration and surplus recommendation, 3 additional building surplus, a change in surplus date, and 1 name change request. In terms of this review, there are several factors that must be considered: academic performance, climate indicators, the access and quality and distribution of our programming to ensure that all student populations are getting access and being served in high quality programs, as well as making sure that we have all geographic areas equitably served. We also look at school enrollment and school size. And you're going to hear me talk a lot about that tonight. The building utilization and the condition of the facility. We have a lot of facilities that are not in great shape. Schools scheduled for closure as part of the 21st Century Buildings Plan or other changes. And then normally during this time of year, we would also be considering renewal for our operator-run schools, which are like our charter, contract, and those kinds of types of schools. This year, we don't have renewal recommendations because we start that process in the penultimate year of a school's contract, typically in March, which is when school closure for COVID had first happened, and we didn't know, what the next steps would be. So it just really, if you think about back to March, I don't know that we all knew we would still be closed today, or the pandemic would be where it is today. But so anyway, that kind of interrupted the process. We had the board, you guys voted last spring to extend the schools who would have been up for renewals contracts by a year. So those schools plus the schools whose terms end at the end of school year 2022 will go through renewal during that time frame. All right, so first I'm going to start with our previously announced recommendations for closure and building surplus. The first is for Alexander Hamilton Elementary School. The schools that are related to it, and you see the pictures of their new 21st century facilities, are James Mosher Elementary School, which you see at the top, and Calverton Elementary Middle School, which you see at the bottom. The recommendations that are before the board are to close Alexander Hamilton at the end of the 2021 school year, rezone pre-K to 2nd grade students to James Mosher, and students in grades 3 through 8 to Calverton Elementary Middle, and then to expand the Mosher Calverton zone to absorb Alexander Hamilton zone, and then to surplus the Alexander Hamilton building at the end of the school year when it's no longer needed for educational purposes. Alexander Hamilton is a small elementary school. It's located near James Mosher and Calverton. And so it's recommended for closure due to enrollment. There's just not enough enrollment to sustain 3 schools in that close proximity in that community. And so that's why this recommendation is pending. Again, it's per the 21st Century Plan. In October 2017, we asked the board to approve the reconfiguration of Calverton and Mosher to take effect when the renovated buildings open. So that action has already been approved. And last spring, the board approved the earlier change to Calverton, who today is serving students in grades 3 through 8. All 3 schools, because of their small sizes, have depended on supplemental funding in order to meet, the basic requirements for students. So closing Alexander Hamilton will improve the success of students by enabling them to not only benefit from being in a 21st century facility, which we know studies show your space impacts your ability to learn, but also in these programs that have gone through the changes that we talked about this at the top of this. So this just shows you a summary of like the enrollment trends. So you can see in school year 16-17, Alexander Hamilton had 254 students. So elementary school, a healthy elementary school, you want to be around 400 or so students, ideal as a more ideal size. So 254 is small, and it's dropped, since that time. In last school year's official enrollment was at 160. It's about 142 today. And you can see similarly, the other schools have been small. So these changes in the configuration will help. One thing to note for members of the public, Mosher and Calverton have been in swing spaces for the last 2 years in buildings that are outside of this community while the construction was happening. And so some of the drops in their enrollment I think is attributed to that. So some of that is a larger trend, but some of that is also because they've been in places distant from where students live. This shows the proposed new zone for the school. So this dotted line around the outside is the 1 mile radius around the school. With this shaded yellow area would be the new expanded Calverton Mosher zone. Pink are showing you Calverton students, red are showing you Alexander Hamilton students, and blue are showing you James Mosher students. The triangles are your early learners, and the circles are your upper elementary and middle grade students. And so you can see, what that looks like in terms of what the new zone would look like for students. In terms of implications for students in terms of travel and distance, this change, keeps students under a mile. So just as a reminder, for students who are in elementary grades who travel more than a mile, they receive transportation. And so this is mostly centered on elementary students. For students living in Calverton is the middle grades program for students in the community. So for any middle grade students, the distance is more than 1.5. So you can see that the change in the distance keeps students under that mile marker in terms of distance travel to school. Any questions from the board about that first recommendation? Okay. So next I'm going to share a recommendation for Guilford Elementary Middle School. And so the related schools for Guilford are Walter P. and Lois T. Murray. And so you can see again with the rendering of what the new campus will look like. And so you can see Walter P. over here. This is where Lois T. Murray's entrance would be for the related schools. So the recommendation for Guilford is to close the elementary middle school at the end of this school year and to rezone students to Walter P. Carter Elementary Middle School, to expand the Walter P. Carter Elementary Middle School zone to include the Guilford zone, and then the surplus of Guilford building in summer 2021 when the building is no longer needed for educational purposes. So some considerations in school year 14-15, staff as in the board approved amending the 21st century school buildings plan to indicate that Guilford would close and merge with Walter P. Carter after the completion of Walter P. Carter as a renovated 21st century school. This again was precipitated by not enough enrollment to support 2 schools in proximity within that community. Guilford was selected as a facility to close because the majority of students live closer to Walter P. Carter than they do to Guilford. Again, closing Guilford enables students to not only attend in the 21st century space, but to have access to that robust academic programming and a school that was created for both school communities. This is true for all of the 21st century school mergers. The focus that was selected by the school community is, again, STEAM here. Additionally, Lois T. Murray will be located on this campus. I'm going to talk a little bit more about them later in the presentation, so I'm not going to go into that here. Here again shows you the enrollment. This is an elementary middle school. So this is, and so remember I gave that 400 for an elementary school. Well, this school has middle grades, and you can see in 16, 17, they were at 368 and 339 respectively. And then in 2019 at 305, 395. So you want an elementary middle school to have many more students than that, 500 or higher for an elementary middle school. So again, this brings students into a school that has a healthy population. So this map again shows you the zone. Again, the dotted outlines that 1 mile radius. This shows what the new expanded zone would look like. It's all of this shaded in between. The purple are your Walter P. Carter students, red are your Guilford students, the circles are your elementary students, and the triangles are your middle grade students. I want to point this out too for members of the public. So like these schools are schools that live on either side of York Road. So this too points again, like I started this meeting talking about the history of our city. This is the history of redlining in our city that still kind of shows its face and how our communities operate today. And so what we're doing as city schools is investing where our students live and not where they don't. And where Guilford, where there's this more wealthy community. York Road, there's for people that are familiar, this is like the origins of redlining, and there is a wall along York Road that separates these two communities from each other. In terms of distance change in travel for distance for students, it doesn't change the distance much. Again, we're looking for elementary students to be traveling less than a mile, and for middle grade students to be traveling less than 1.5 miles. And you can see the average distance for students is less than half a mile with that investment in the community in which they live. Any questions about that? Okay. So next I'm going to share a new recommendation. This is an unannounced recommendation. We thought heavily about whether or not we would move forward with any unannounced recommendations. In this case, we thought it was in the best interest of students to actually move forward with this recommendation. A lot of that has to do with the leadership of these two school principals who've been just really strong and collaborative in trying to figure out how to solve the challenge that they've been facing, with revenues down, with the impacts of COVID. We thought waiting to have you as a board consider this would potentially be more harmful than good, given the kind of state of where the schools are and with the challenge with they're struggling, and that revenue could be down next year just based on what's happening with businesses and taxes and just our sources of funding from our state and local partners. So this is a recommendation for Lockerman Bundy. The related school is Marianne Winterling. This is Marianne Winterling's facility. The recommendation is to close the Lockerman Bundy program at the end of this school year, to expand the Marianne Winterling zone to include the Lockerman Bundy zone and to merge the two school communities, to also adjust the Marianne Winterling zone so it does not cross Route 40. And students who live on the north side of 40 would be rezoned to Harlem Park. This would apply to new families, not existing families. Existing families will be able to stay with the school community that they know. And then the surplus Lockerman Bundy building in the summer of 2021. Similar to the other recommendations, this is driven by enrollment. So enrollment has continued to decline in this community over time. Both Lockerman Bundy and Marianne Winterling have been dependent on baseline supplemental funding over the last 3 years to support just, again, basic instructional programming at the school. Enrollment projections show continued decline just based about what's happening with trends within the city, within this community. And so combining the programs into one program would ease those challenges. Remember, schools are funded on a per student basis. So having a healthy student population helps to ensure there's enough resources to support that strong, robust, varied programming that we want for all students. I talked earlier about how these two leaders have been really working together, realizing that they both were, had really small budgets and have, really been kind of having a lot of collaboration. They both currently share some staff members and programming. They've shared professional development. They share field trips. They share after school programming and partner supports like Org Kids. So, this is important. The other thing that I want to note here, if the board approves, another step that we will do immediately after this is around the name. So these schools have names that are of importance to us within our district. They're after African American educators. So it's important to the history of city schools and to these school communities. And so we would work with those school communities around how to maintain that history and how we handle the naming with care and how we think about how we maintain that legacy of the people that we're honoring with the name selection.